episode number 319 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in today's show, we learn of a data breach at EasyJet affecting 9 million customers. Vending machines appear in airports selling PPE, and AirFrance announces the retirement of their entire fleet of A380s. In the military news this week, we hear of awful news from the Snowbirds Display Team and the Irish Air Corps in their market for a new transport plane. I talk to Max Trescott about innovative autoland products from Garmin, and Nev brings us his latest bumper highlights package. So joining me this week, as always, over on his own in the PTUK studios, is, of course, Matt Smith.
Lonely, I am so lonely. It's been too long, mate. I'm sorry. Although we did have a nice surprise this week, didn't we?
We did.
We actually had a social distancing chat in the queue to get in Lidl's in Beccles today, didn't on yesterday, wasn't it? We did that.
Yeah, we done a complete kind of military operation to appear at the same time at our local large supermarket, and
by military operation he means a couple of WhatsApps were exchanged, and so,
So we had a social distance chat in the queue, and then we had a social distance wander around the store, which was quite nice.
Is it sad that that's the most exciting thing that happened to me pretty much all week?
Well, to be fair, it was for me too, Matt. You know, it's nice to see someone other than
Careful how you answer that. Other than who? The wife. Careful. Danger, Will Robinson. It's all right. It's fine. She never watches this rubbish. It's fine.
So you're well then, Matt. You're not too hot in the studio then.
It is quite warm in the studio actually, because it's windy here today, isn't it? But it's actually been quite a warm day, and a couple of those of you who follow us in the who are in the little BFF chat group thing, and because, as I say, I had a little dip in my massive paddling pool that I've got at the bottom of the garden because the weather was that nice. Yes, I did scare a couple of people with photographs, so I think they've got over the shock.
Yeah, that looked very nice. All you needed was one of those kind of air bubbly producing things.
Yeah, one of my friends actually said that the mistake that I'd made there is the fact that I didn't have a large gin and tonic in my hand, and I think they had a good point. I think. Or
you could have just had Captain Al in there with you, and then you would have had these
the jacuzzi
air
effect,
bubble.
lovely.
Jacuzzi
okay.
Thanks, yeah.
Anyway, on that bombshell.
Moving on. So, joining us this week, back with us this week. We're glad to have him back because we do miss him when he's not here, especially when he's on his wine tasting jaunts away. It is, of course, then the legend that is of audio and visual things, Nev.
Yes, I am back by popular request. Well, a little bit of request, not that many.
There were a couple of WhatsApps exchanged again. Yes.
But last week, because it was very military heavy, and it was a good show last week. I mean, I did watch quite a lot of it, and I understood none of it because of its being grey and military. But that said, it was a superb show. But my knowledge of military is so limited, I could not even put it on the back of a postage stamp. So I thought it best to leave it to the experts last week.
I just sat there through most of it going, it's just going over there. But I'll tell you what was nice, and we'll introduce Armando in a moment. In fact, actually, I'll do it for a change. Hi, Armando. We got this. It was an amazing.
That was a bit of a poor introduction.
I'm sorry.
Honestly, I had a really good one lined up as well.
You can do that one anyway. So it was. What was so lovely though was to hear him and Rick and Micah really sort of getting into the nuts and bolts of it. So actually, I was loving the interaction with it, which was so good.
Yeah, well, Nev, you'll be happy to know that I also don't know anything about it, which is why we had Rick and Micah on the show. So I could just pretend to throw some questions out there and they would answer it.
And of course, joining us, as you heard, it's the man who puts the L
we'll upset him now, as you see. Look.
In outdoor landscaping. It's Armando.
Really? All that just for that. Right, okay.
Thanks, Carlos. I was really trying to beat it. There's a thunderstorm coming in here in Lake Norman, and I had a honeydew list, so I was trying to get through the yard work. And, of course, this is the first time I've ever taken the complete top off of my Jeep. And as I just mentioned, there's a thunderstorm coming. So I had to hurry up, get the tops off the Jeep, and then park it in the garage quite quickly.
I did notice the weather has been quite poor your way the last kind of few days, Armando, viewing the weather through the X-Plane 11 when I've been flying into Charlotte last week.
Yeah, you sent me that that screen capture of you flying the 737 into Charlotte, and I would describe it as very British weather the last couple of days. It's just kind of been misty, low visibility, and kind of rainy, but not rainy, just enough to make you want to stay indoors.
Thank you. I think that's a backhanded compliment if ever I heard one.
I miss it. No, absolutely not. I completely miss sitting on my back garden in Bury St. Edmunds with a cup of tea. In the conservatory.
Oh, very lovely. Yes, well done, you. Yes.
Oh, how posh.
Frightfully nice. Yes. Anyway, shall we move on? I was trawling before we move on too much. I was trawling through the old internet and stuff, and there's sort of a bit of a theme running, isn't there, with people and having like sort of silly videos and stuff that are doing the rounds. And there's a really lovely one which I'm just going to play you a little bit from here because it's a bit limited because of the music track that's on it. So I'll keep it low in the mix. But Wizz Air have been having a go at this whole sort of viral video thing, if you like, and I guess they're busy prepping for what we hope will be lots of flights sort of returning to the airwaves. It's I'll make sure
like a Saturday night disco with Carlos.
Well, quite. It is it's not entirely dissimilar. But as I say, I assume it's all choreographed and everything by sort of other people. But what a great little. What a great little video this is. I tell you what, seriously, air crews and stuff, keep these coming because they're a lot of fun, these things. I think they're great. It's I'd say that we're watching the video now. There's some serious choreography got into these little routines.
They put a lot of effort into this.
I don't think they put a lot of effort into landing that plane just now, though. Did you see there was no stabilisation whatsoever going on?
I mean, for those watching the audio version, it is a blow-up aeroplane, so nobody was harmed during the landing of said blow-up aeroplane. Honestly. Anyway, you get the gist of it. What a great idea. Say seriously, well done to Wizz. What a lot of fun. Do keep it coming. Do keep them coming.
I'm glad to see the full use of PPE.
Right. Well, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, in fact, actually, we're going to be talking about PPE a bit later on. In the
I thought you were going to say PPI.
PPI. Yeah, no, that ship has sailed, I think, isn't it?
We're a bit too late for that, Matt.
Yeah.
No.
Anyway, moving on.
So we are going to start the show then, as we do each week, with our rundown of the weekly news from around the world and the UK. So, if all you gents are ready.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Well, ready to go. So, kicking off this week's first news story on the bbc.co.uk website. And it's a story that did make me worry just slightly when I saw it. And the headline is EasyJet admits data of 9 million hacked. So EasyJet has admitted this week that a highly sophisticated cyber attack has affected approximately 9 million of their customers. I hope that's not me. It said in email addresses and travel details had been stolen and that 2,208 customers had also had their credit and debit card details accessed. Oh, well, good luck with that one. The firm has informed the UK's Information Commissioner's Office while it investigates the breach. EasyJet first became aware of the attack in January. It told the BBC that it was only able to notify customers whose credit cards were stolen in early April. This was a highly sophisticated attacker. It took time to understand the scope of the attack and to identify who had been impacted, the airline told the BBC. We could only inform people once the investigation had been, progressed enough and that we were able to identify whether any individuals had been affected, then who had been impacted, and what information had been accessed. Stolen credit card data, including the 3-digit security code known as the CVV number on the back of your card itself, was also taken. And EasyJet added that it has gone public now in order to warn the 9 million customers whose email addresses had been stolen to be wary of phishing attacks. It said that it would notify everyone affected by the 26th of May. I can confirm they did email me this morning. It did not provide details about the nature of the attack or the motives, but said it is investigating suggested hackers were targeting company intellectual property rather than information that could be used in identity theft. There is no evidence that any personal information of any nature has been misused. However, the recommendation of the ICO, we are communicating with approximately 9 million customers whose travel details were accessed to advise them of protective steps to minimize any risk of potential phishing. It says that we are advising customers, or EasyJet advised customers, to be cautious of any communications purporting to come from EasyJet or EasyJet Holidays. It says here that people have the right to expect that organisations will handle their personal information securely and responsibly, and when this doesn't happen, we will investigate and take robust action where necessary. Also warned people to be on the lookout for phishing attacks and directed them to advice on their website of how to spot such scams. Now, I did get the email this morning from EasyJet because we have obviously booked our flights for Malta in September with EasyJet. Quite a long email that we got that was signed at the bottom, very nice. I think everyone got the same email, generic email, but it did go through in quite detail and stuff as to what had gone on and what kind of things that you have to look out for. Now, Matt, am I right in thinking that these are one of these things is where you get one of those Mickey Mouse kind of emails that comes from an email address that has absolutely nothing to do with EasyJet?
Yes, is the short answer, I suppose, to that. Although I have to say that they are very good at disguising, the actual email address itself. Now, I notice with one or two that I've had recently, and it has made it. You have to really know what you're looking for, and you've got to know like the email address that you're trying to pick holes in, essentially, because it would be very easy to, if you don't really understand how domain names work and all that kind of thing, it may not be that straightforward to spot. I mean, it's. I
must have had at least £4,000 or £5,000 worth of income tax refunds in the last few weeks from the Inland Revenue. And you get the emails come through, and you look at the email address, and you can just instantly spot that is nothing to do with the .gov.
I mean, to be fair, these things are not directed at you, though, are they? This is the thing. It's looking for those who are perhaps less tech savvy, who are sort of looking, people like, my mum's getting really good at spotting stuff like that now, but she does at least have access.
Yeah, but who want to mess with her?
Well, no, quite. No, only foolish people, let's be honest. But the thing is, she's getting quite good at sort of spotting things now, and she'll quite often say, this email address doesn't look right. Is it something I need to look at? And more often than not now, she's already spotted it herself. But I mean, Nev, what would you suggest? Just from a sort of generic point of view, really, how people can sort of spot these things and avoid sort of being caught by phishing scams.
Well, my stock answer will be you should be flying BA, but of course they went through their own problems not that long ago, so that'll be a bit of a fail, wouldn't it? Having said all this, of course, you've got to remember that these scams are incredibly convincing, and whether it's things on the telephone, which we've had and seen before, or whether it's emails, these things, even I think one would say, even if you are reasonably tech savvy, it is very easy to be caught out by things. And so, as usual on the internet, a bit like newspapers sometimes, everything is not always what it seems. And caution is the name of the game here. But it's caught out the best people as well. Unfortunately, we live in a very internet environment, don't we? So whether we do it our online shopping, or whether it's our internet banking, or whether it's booking our flights, whatever it is, we are heavily reliant on the security of these things. And all I would say is that if any kind of organisation is thinking about having an IT upgrade for security reasons, then go ahead and do it, because that will be helpful to the rest of us.
Absolutely, yeah, good advice, really. But yes, I mean, this is happening too regularly, though, isn't it? I mean, if it's not EasyJet, it's you've already, BA, as you said, Nev, have had their fair share of IT outages and issues. I
think the whole thing is book with your credit card if you can. If you do have a credit card. Well, yeah.
Also, I do wonder if we are reaching a point where people like. In fact, actually, one of the things that really annoys me in lots of ways. I'm using the Ryanair website as an option here, but not a lot of the sites, and I don't think Ryanair do either, where they don't store the card details on the website, so you can't store it. And I know from previous, EasyJet do allow you to store your card details on file, and I wonder if we need to get to a point perhaps where people are unable to do that. Therefore, there won't be such delicate information that can be
part of their checkout process. Matt, is on their website. You can click on the box that says "Store your details with us for future ticket purchases," and I never click that. I just put the details.
Masha says something interesting in the chat room. Actually, she says she always hovers over all the links in the email, and if they all direct to the same place, it's sure to be dodgy. And that's very good advice. I think definitely.
That is a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought.
See where it's coming from, but you can do all that just as you hover over the email address itself, or the name of the email address. It will come up with the full email address, won't it?
Wow. Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Great advice. Anyway, we'd better move on.
Exciting story for you next, Matt, from the lovely Ryanair.
Well, I don't know if exciting is the word, but yes, it is on Reuters, so it's a good source, shall we say. And the headline is: Unions say Ryanair exaggerating COVID threat to undermine conditions. So that story is out of Dublin, and it says that several Ryanair trade unions say that they will resist an attempt to cut pay and conditions for a 5-year period, citing management promises of a swift recovery from the coronavirus and the fact that its CEO has committed to a pay cut for just 1 year. So Europe's largest low-cost airline plans to cut 3,000 pilots and cabin crew and reduce pay by up to 20% to deal with the crisis, which has grounded almost all of its flights until July. In a letter sent by the airline to several unions, seen by Reuters, Ryanair said it was in a battle for long-term survival. But unions in key markets, including Ireland, Britain, Spain, Italy and Belgium, told members the measures contradicted guidance to investors. Ryanair said on Monday it saw significant opportunities from the crisis and forecast it would emerge stronger. CEO Michael O'Leary said he hoped 2019 passenger levels would return in 2021, with ticket prices recovering in 2022. These statements do not come from an airline that is fighting for its survival. The Belgian Cockpit Association said Ryanair will likely be one of the biggest winners of the after crisis, a memo to its members had said. British union BALPA accused Ryanair in a memo of taking advantage of the crisis to lower long-term costs irrespective of when the pandemic is over. Several unions said that they wanted guarantees that if they accept pay cuts, redundancies would be avoided. The Belgian union called for Ryanair to cut hours for all pilots to avoid the job losses. Eddie Wilson, who is the chief executive of Ryanair DAC, Ryanair's main airline unit, said that there were signs of blind optimism from unions, which he said did not understand Ryanair had to be prudent as it had no one to bail it out if the situation deteriorated. And obviously we know from previous stories that of course he's been quite sort of negative about some of the other airlines that have been receiving bailouts from like the EU Commission and things, haven't they? So I do understand what he's saying here. I mean, I don't know. What do we think, guys? Is he correct? I mean,
I'll chime in real quick on this one. I don't think this is a time to be doing any decisions that are going to last 5 years. So just recently, I've already seen passenger levels coming back up, and there is no doubt that the aviation world is going to look different. The airline industry is going to look different on the backside of this, but we took a pay cut in our company. We've reduced some hours. The guarantees have reduced. But as I think Micah was saying last week, some companies are going to come out stronger on the other side of this. Some will fold. We anticipate, at least here in the U.S., that come September 30th, once the government subsidies and the government aid ends assuming there's not a follow-on, some of these companies are not going to be able to make it through, which is going to make other companies stronger. So it's just, I hate to continue using the word, but it's an unprecedented time in the aviation industry. And I would not, if I was king of the world, I would not make any decisions that are going to last more than a year, because it's just all going to look very different. You guys have a pretty robust, low-cost European market over there. I don't think that the passenger levels will stay low for more than a year. That's just my personal opinion, because it's just such so much more common in Europe, and I was part of that, right? I mean, I was traveling all over the place in Europe, and it's just such a common mode of transportation that I think you guys are probably going to see an increase in passenger loads quicker than we are here in the U.S. So if I was he, I probably wouldn't commit to anything that's more than a year out.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously you're right completely, Armando. I mean, it's just, but do you not think perhaps the attitudes towards flying? I mean, people are feeling a lot more nervous as a result of this, and people are. I mean, even when, I'm using shopping as an example here. I get really nervous now when I go shopping because of, frankly, idiots around me who, everybody around you is like doing their best to sort of keep a sensible distance, etc., and then one muppet will bump into you as they try and go between you two down the aisle in the thing because the person in front of you is taking too long. I'm using that as an analogy, but do you think people are going to start feeling differently about flying because of this pandemic?
I think it's going to depend on one thing, and is if we see a second wave of the virus. And I think if we see that second wave and a second blooming effect, people will be much more careful, and it won't. People will stay in. I don't think that we'll see a rebound in the industry. If we don't see that second wave and that second bloom, I hate to sound cynical, but I think we have pretty short-term memories. I think people will want to get out. People will want to start traveling again. Yeah. And we'll see an effect for a year or two, but I think we'll go back to it.
Okay. Yeah. And Nick Anderson saying in the chat room here, actually saying that once you give away something from your conditions and remuneration is gone, once you give away something from your conditions and remuneration is gone, I don't know of any airline that has ever volunteered to return them. So it's like one of those. Once you've lost those conditions, you're not going to necessarily be able to negotiate them back.
Sure, and this is so interesting because I'm right in the middle of it. So our contract has changed without our consent. We have lost some benefits. We have lost some perks in the job, and all of us are scratching our head because it gets complicated here in the U.S. at least, because I'm Pittsburgh based. My company's headquartered in California. So do we fall under California law, or do I fall under Pennsylvania law, or the state that I reside in, which is North Carolina? And if I'm losing some benefits, well, how are we going to get those back? Because we're not unionized in my company, in our Part 135 aviation. We're not, very few, I don't know of any that are unionized. How are we going to get those benefits back? It's a great point, and it might be a strategic decision on behalf of the company to do this, like Nick is saying, to take advantage of something and
yeah. I'm just going to take a couple of comments from the chat room here, actually. Stephen H. is saying tourism down, business flights down, but expats, Poles, Spanish, etc., will want to visit family, go for the weekend. Are they enough to keep said routes viable, which is a good question. And also Laura Davis is saying that she had a co-worker upset about being called back to work because she had a flight booked somewhere. I think that's the thing. It's like if people aren't comfortable going back to work to do these things, because you're having to do it perhaps against either your better judgment or your just how you're feeling about it, because you don't want to lose your job, I guess. But perhaps one of the other situations here is to make it so that if you don't have to, maybe use someone else if you're not entirely comfortable and be more lenient. But I can't see anyone doing that. There is actually a little bit of an update to this story, which I will just cover very quickly. This was on RTE, one of the news networks in Ireland, saying that Ryanair's Laudamotion said that it would close its main base in Vienna after the transport union refused to accept pay cuts for employees of the carrier hard hit by the coronavirus, allowed it deeply regrets the loss of more than 300 jobs for its A320 team and the closing of Lauda's A320 base in Vienna on Friday, May the 29th. The carrier said Ryanair had earlier threatened to close the base if it could not get agreement on salary cuts for Laudamotion employees in Vienna. The airline has 3 other smaller bases, 2 in Germany, in Dusseldorf and Stuttgart, and 1 in Palma de Mallorca in Spain. So as I say, pulling that. So it's say what you like about him, he will get his way one way or the other. That's the only thing, I suppose.
But before we move on, Matt, I will just say this week I saw one of those hideous morning breakfast shows where they have people phone in and moan about things, and people were moaning about Ryanair and about certain things that Ryanair have done during this pandemic, all to do with refunds mostly. And a lot of these people were saying they will never ever fly Ryanair, never fly EasyJet again.
They will.
But I guarantee you, they'll be on there. Yeah. They'll be paying for flights because they're not going to want to go and pay 4 times the amount of money to go to Spain or wherever.
No, exactly.
Just to add a bit more excitement into the mix, if I may. The 5 o'clock groan, as I call it, which is the the government update on the coronavirus situation, which we have here in the UK at 5 o'clock every weekday and 4 o'clock at the weekends. They have announced that from the 8th of June, there is going to be a 14-day quarantine period for anyone entering the UK, apart from some Irish citizens and for some people that are exempt. Key workers, medical staff, and etc. So that's going to put the cat amongst the pigeons, trying to negotiate that with the other end of the flight as well, isn't it? So I don't know how that's going to play out, and they're going to keep it under review every 3 weeks, they said, but let's see how that plays out.
But when you come back, for example, we're still fingers crossed that the Malta Air Show may well be going ahead and you guys might be able to go out to that. Does that mean, though, based on obviously this information now, when we get to September, are you going to be required to have 2 weeks quarantine before you can go back to work?
No, I've got it all worked out. I'm going to do it by proxy. So, in fact, what I'm going to be doing is spending an extra 2 weeks in Malta whilst they change the rules again. So, by the time I come back, I'll all be good to go.
I mean, it's a sound argument. I like it. Yeah. Good
I won't be stopping him.
Good luck with that, everyone.
Yes.
So, Nev, sticking with you, Nev, some good news, I suppose, for Boeing with this next one.
It's about time, isn't it? And so this is on the thepointsguy.com website, which is a good website, I have to say. I do like it. And it says BA is adding a new member to its fleet. This week, BA will take delivery of its first 787-10 aircraft. So this is the newest variant in the Dreamliner family. And it will join the ranks of the 787-8 and -9 that are already part of BA's fleet. And as reported by Executive Traveller, BA's first -10 is set to arrive in London on Thursday morning, which was yesterday. I don't believe it is actually here yet. I stand to be corrected on that, but I'm not sure if it's actually here yet. The aircraft, which was originally supposed to be delivered in January but was delayed, is now listed as ready for delivery, according to the All Things Boeing 787 blog. Reportedly registered as a Golf Zulu Bravo Lima Alpha. The aircraft took 2 test flights in the past 2 weeks on May the 8th and May the 13th. The May 13th flight departed from Boeing's Charleston factory and circled for approximately 1 hour and 43 minutes over the Atlantic Ocean, according to flight tracking website Radar24. The aircraft is the first of 12 -10s that BA has on order with Boeing. As previously reported, the -10 will feature a 4-class configuration: First, Club Suite, World Traveller Plus, and World Traveller. Notably, the -10s will feature 8 first-class seats and 48 of the airline's latest Club Suite business class products. It's the first Boeing aircraft to have come delivered with the Club Suite installed, rather than retrofitting it as they did on the 777s. When the airline was set to take delivery of the aircraft earlier this year, it announced that the -10 would first fly to Atlanta. However, given the current aviation environment amid the coronavirus pandemic, it remains unclear how the airline will utilise the -10s in the near term. BA did not provide comment on its plans for the rollout of the -10 into service. The -10 is the longest of the 3 Dreamliner family at 223 feet long. as well as aesthetic and performance differences, the Dash 10 will have even more improved cabin pressure and air quality, as well as lower noise. Additionally, this will be the first 787 where BA will have Wi-Fi installed on every aircraft. Eventually, these aircraft, as well as the existing fleet of 788s and 789s and the new Airbus A350s, these are going to replace the BA's fleet of 747s. So given the uncertain circumstances, many airlines have pushed back deliveries of new aircraft. However, that's not entirely the case for BA and its parent company, IAG. Given that a number of aircraft are already financed from a cash point of view, it makes sense for us to take the aircraft because we'll have paid pre-delivery payments. So when we take the aircraft and then put the financing in place, there is actually a cash benefit to us. That's the IAG CEO, Willie Walsh, commenting. And I think it's good to have a bit of good news here. And I think that the taking delivery of the aircraft when they are, obviously there's a cost associated with it, but I think it will mean that when things do return to some sort of sense of normality, they will be in a good position to offer the services again, because again, the 747 retirement I think is still due for 2024 in total. They haven't
accelerated that then.
I don't think they have, no. But it's interesting to see how they're getting on with that. And of course, this week there was also a new Airbus A350-1000 delivered to BA. That came in on the 20th of May. That's Golf X-Ray Whiskey Bravo Fox. So A350-1000, similar to, in fact, identical to the one that Carlos and I flew on to Dubai. So that's good. And let's hope, because it's all about fuel economy right now, isn't it? Economical flying for the airlines, even though gas prices are at all-time low, I would imagine, although they probably bought the fuel probably a year ago, I would imagine. But it'll be interesting to see. So low cost, low operational cost flying is the name of the game at the moment, I think.
Very true. It's the way things, I think, especially after what the crisis we're in now. I think most airlines are going to be looking at running massively fuel efficient and, green aircraft, I should say.
Yes.
And I'm surprised I haven't been shouted at by our producer here, because I just realised that I played the video of the A350 when we were talking about the 7.
But isn't that standard media operating procedures?
I've started an accidental new segment about which video Matt can play in the wrong place at the wrong time. So apologies for that, everyone. The video that I played was actually of the A350-1000 and not the 787. So sorry about that. Whoops.
Don't panic. That'll all come out in the wash.
Right. Okay.
So Armando, next up with you with a really funky looking Cessna.
Yeah, this is from Textron Aviation on May 17th. They announced the successful first flight of its new twin utility turboprop, the Cessna Sky Courier. We talked about this airplane a couple months ago as it was in development, but this milestone flight is a significant step towards its entry into service for a clean sheet aircraft, and it kicks off the important flight test program that validates the performance of the Sky Courier. According to them, today was an exciting day for our employees, our suppliers, and our customers. The Sky Courier performed exactly as we expected, which is a testament to the entire team of men and women who worked together to prepare for this day. I'm proud of the way the team has persevered through disruptions caused by COVID-19 and remained focused on getting us to this point. The Cessna Sky Courier will be an excellent product in its segment due to the combination of cabin flexibility, payload capability, superior performance, and low operating costs, as we just mentioned. Our customers will be very pleased with what they experience from this aircraft. That was from Ron Draper, the president CEO of Textron Aviation. The aircraft took off from the company's East Campus in Beachfield Airport. It was piloted by Corey Eckhart, a senior test pilot, and Aaron Tobias, a chief test pilot. They flew for 2 hours and 15 minutes. They evaluated the aircraft's performance, stability, control, propulsion, environmental flight controls, and avionics system. Overall, the company seems to be pretty pleased with what they came up with. And just for background, the Sky Courier is powered by the PT6A-65 engine, so a very reliable engine. It's got 2 of them. Various configurations will be available, including a 6,000-pound payload-capable freighter, a 19-seat passenger version, or a mixed passenger freight combination, all based on one common platform. It will have a Garmin G1000 NXI avionics suite and be able to cruise up to 200 knots with a maximum range of 900 miles. So we had another comment that FedEx Express is one of the largest users of the Cessna Caravan, and they've got 100 orders for this aircraft with the initial fleet order of 50 with options for 50 more. This is, as you're seeing in the pictures there, it looks a little bit like the Dornier 228, I think it was, but very capable aircraft, and we've talked about it before, where it's just going to be revolutionary to the cargo industry, because there's a lot of feeder aircraft that go in, mostly caravans right now. There's caravans, there's a little bit of ATR 72s, and we've got some PTUK family members that fly cargo. But I think this is going to be an excellent addition to that unique market.
So I mean, this is essentially a Cessna Caravan on steroids, isn't it? I mean, that's essentially what we've got here.
The Caravan is a tried and proven aircraft. It's just a bulletproof airplane. It's used all around the world. It's incredibly reliable, incredibly capable. So I'm sure that they're looking at some of the lessons learned from that program, which has been going on since the 80s. But by all accounts, this is a clean sheet design. They're going to build on the success of the Caravan into this airplane. And of course, having 2 engines is going to make a huge difference. I remember living out in Clovis, New Mexico, and there was a guy that came in every day. He was a UPS, feeder pilot, and he would come in every day at 5 a.m. and then hang around for 12 hours and then leave at 5 p.m. back to Albuquerque. And between Clovis and Albuquerque, there's some like 12,000 foot mountains, and Caravan is unpressurized, and the weather out, we've talked about it. The weather out west is incredibly unpredictable and can be pretty violent. And this airplane will be able to get higher, faster, carry more, and be just a little bit more safety reliable with the 2 engines instead of just the 1.
Because again, presumably it can obviously fly with just 1, I guess, if there is a problem mid-flight type thing.
Yeah, it will be certified to do a certain amount of single engine performance. Perhaps fully loaded at 6,000 pounds, it can't keep a climb going, but there's
it'd be enough to control a landing or a ditch, essentially.
Yeah, much more than a single engine. That all being said, the Caravan is an excellent gliding platform. It's a Cessna at the end of the day.
Armando, this takes the LD3 shipping containers on this.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
and
three of those.
Yeah, so that's going to be a huge improvement right there, because the Caravan, you have to just floor load everything and strap it all down. It's got different sections with nets that the pilot or a loader is responsible for. So if they can do containers, then that's going to reduce the turn time on some of these aircraft quite a bit.
Absolutely.
It's good.
Yeah.
So
actually, before we move on, I just wanted to say congratulations to Miss Jody Ruger. She got married. So now I've told you guys, we had her on the show, and afterwards I had a chance to meet her in person, and we got a chance to hang out over at the Reno Air Races. She married probably one of the rock stars in Reno Air Racing, Sean Van Hatten. And Sean is just an awesome dude, just the most calm personality. And he's had his fair share of maydays out there at Reno Air Races, including one which was when he was briefing it. We were just like, man, it gives me goosebumps to think about it, but just so lucky. But Sean is an accomplished race pilot. He is a test pilot. He's been to test pilot school. He's just an awesome guy. And Jody, if you guys haven't been tracking since we had her on the show, she's up and coming in the air show circuit herself, in addition to her airline career. So congratulations to Sean and Jody. I'm sure they're just going to be a power couple in aviation here.
Yeah. I bet. Just very quickly going back to what you said, producer John just given me a picture. This is of the layout you were talking about inside said Cessna, Carlos. There you go.
Oh yeah, with the LD3s. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So there we go. Anyway, next story is with you, my friend.
Yes, the next story. This is moving a bit of a sadder story, really. Those of you who watch the various news wires will have heard of this morning. Broke earlier. And this is the crash of the Pakistan International Airlines A320 at Karachi, which was today, impacted residential areas during final approach. So the aircraft in question, which itself is, well, it's just over 15 years old, this A320, was registration Alpha Papa Bravo Lima Delta, performing flight PK8303 from Lahore to Karachi, Pakistan, with 90 passengers and 8 crew, aborted the approach to Karachi due to problems with the extension of the nose gear and performed a go-around. While on a left downwind for a second approach to runway 25 left, about a beam of the threshold of runway 25 left, the crew requested a turn left, immediately reporting they had lost both engines, the CFM56s, and repeatedly reportedly declared a mayday about 5 minutes after the go-around. The RAT, or the Ram Air turbine, deployed, and the tower cleared the aircraft to land on either runway 25 left or 25 right. The aircraft unfortunately lost height and impacted a residential area called Model Colony, featuring concrete multi-storey buildings on the second final approach east of the aerodrome, presumably while on a final approach to runway 25 left, and burst into flames at around about 14:40 hours or 0940 Zulu. On the ground near position, the coordinates to position for GPS, but we won't read all those out. About 1,350 metres or 0.74 nautical miles short of the runway threshold. 5 multi-storey houses, including the Allied School Airport campus, are being reported to have been de-roofed and set ablaze, debris distributed over the streets. Pakistan plane spotters report the aircraft attempted a belly landing, went around and subsequently crashed. Their photos of the last moments of the aircraft in flight show scrape marks on both the engines and the Ram Air turbine deployed. So this is from
Actually, I've got some photographs up. If you're looking at the YouTube feed, you can just see on the bottom of the end. Sorry, it's not the clearest picture there, but you can just see the bottom where the cowling, the engine cowlings, have clearly come into contact with something. There's another. I'll see if I can zoom the picture in actually and get a.
So from India today, it says here 45 people have been confirmed dead in the incident. At least 4 have been pulled out from alive from the debris of the buildings. Bank of Punjab President Zafar Masood, who was a premium economy passenger on the flight, has survived. He's in hospital and spoke to his mother over the phone. The CEO of PAC PSU Urban Unit, Khalid Shiradil, was also among the passengers and survived the crash. Another passenger, Ammar Rashid, who was on the plane, also survived and is being treated for his injuries at a nearby hospital. His family has said on social media, Mohammed Zabir, seated on 8F, has also survived the crash and has been admitted to hospital. Now, I must admit, after seeing the story broke this morning and reading the various videos that were posted on social media channels from phones and mobile phones and stuff, I mean, you'd be surprised if anyone would have survived that crash.
I mean, there were actually some videos available of the crash site, which we have chosen not to share, but there will be links to them in the show notes if you do want to take a look. But yeah, I mean, it's a miracle that anybody can survive something like that. Certainly the spread of debris was quite vast over a populated area, and that's the
I think to have one engine failure is bad, but I think they reported they had a dual engine issue.
Right.
Is not what you really need, especially just after.
I mean, there's also in the picture there's actually something to do with the Ram Air turbine. I'm not 100% sure what that would. So
that supplies power to basic instrumentation,
right,
and
okay.
I think I'm right in saying, Nick, I think is in the chat room, he'll say, I think it may provide a certain amount of power to a hydraulic system. I'm not sure, but I know it provides power to to kind of critical systems on the plane that need power.
Okay, I mean, you know, there's it's clearly sort of coming. They sort of, I don't know quite what the decision. Well, I guess all will become clear, sort of later on, won't it? I mean, this is at very early stages of investigation, of course. So we'll have to see.
Okay. So moving on to the next story then, and Matt, this one is for you.
Yes, indeed. There's a couple of pictures to go with this story, which I will pop up when I've done. But
I find this story very amusing.
Yeah, it's you know, basically anything that means we might all be able to get back in the air, and all of our wonderful friends who work in the aviation industry can all go back to their lives enjoying flying around and, you know, either being pilots or cabin crew or whatever. So, you know, frankly, any glimmer of something that might be able to make that happen is great as far as I'm concerned. Forbes.com is the website, and this is in Las Vegas, and they're saying that Las Vegas airport vending machines are selling PPE. So flying during the COVID-19 pandemic, and forget your personal protective equipment, McCarran International Airport will hook you up via brand new vending machines selling hand sanitizer, gloves and face masks. It's not unthinkable that somebody would show up at an airport and left behind one of these items that's almost essential now to air travel. Christine Cruz, who is a McCarran International Airport spokesman, told the Las Vegas Review Journal a few days ago. So touting itself as the first airport to deploy PPE machines, McCarran Airport promoted them last week on its social media platforms. It's airport convenience at airport prices. 3 packs of disposable masks are being sold for around $7.50, while a reusable cloth mask will cost around $14.50. 2 sizes of the hand sanitizer can be purchased for $4.25 and $6.50 respectively. A 10-pack of alcohol wipes costs $5.25. N95 masks run at $8.25 a piece, and a 4-pack of disposable gloves is priced at $4.50. McCarran, the nation's 10th busiest airport, recorded a 2.3 million passenger drop in March compared to the same month in 2019. That translates to 53% decrease in arriving and departing passengers over a year. So, I mean, it's now. I know some of the stories. One of the reasons for including this is, of course, some airlines have decided that they are going to supply sort of PPE or certainly face masks and stuff actually at the desk, aren't they? Before they. You know, and are going to ask people to wear them. But yeah, there's some fascinating looking machines. I've got a couple of pictures here. I'll just share with those, if I may. Here, as you know, it just looks like a vending machine, like any other. But you know, it's got sort of PPE in it. I mean, what do you think, Nev? What's your feeling on this? Is it a step in the right direction to sort of getting everyone going?
Well, something has to be, doesn't it? It brings a whole new meaning to the expression "a pack of 3," doesn't it?
Quite.
So, yeah, I think that with what's going on at the moment, anything which is ingenious or interesting or creative is usually a winner, because you know, these being the times we're in, you know, there's got to be some good come out of it. So I think this is a good idea. I think if you're offering this sort of PPE and if it genuinely, you know, does some good, then fine, and it's available in the vending machine format, then so much better, I say.
I think it's a great idea, and I think actually the prices, considering some of the overinflated prices that we've seen here in the UK during this, is that's not you know, for the purpose of being used at the airport when you're travelling through. I think that's a great idea.
I think the price is good if it's the difference between you boarding or not boarding an aircraft.
Yeah.
Well, there is that. There is definitely that.
So moving on to the next story, Nev.
Well, this is an airline that's had a few challenges over the last few months, and that's Norwegian Air. And this is on the Forbes.com website. And it says that following a chaotic few days for Norwegian Air, including a major restructuring, a share issue and a share price collapse, the struggling airline has a whole new range of owners. through a long list of subsidiaries. One of these is the Chinese state. In order to qualify for a substantial package of government support, Norwegian had to reduce its debt. So a debt-to-equity swap was one of the major pillars of the 12.7 billion Norwegian kroner, which is $1.27 billion, restructuring and recapitalization packages. Several of the leasing companies that rent aircraft to Norwegian have now become major owners following the restructure. According to a notification to the Oslo Stock Exchange, the leasing company PTUK Aviation has emerged from the chaos as one of the airline's biggest owners. The Singapore headquartered company now owns a 12.67% stake in Norwegian. The notification goes on to explain that the ownership chain of PTUK Aviation, it's controlled by Sky Splendor Limited, which in turn controlled by an investment arm of Bank of China. Follow the chain upwards and you reach the government of the People's Republic of China. So prior to the restructuring of Norwegian, neither PTUK Aviation nor any of its controlling companies had any financial interest in the airline. The Irish leasing company AerCap also emerged from the restructure as a major owner, holding shares representing 15.9% of the share capital and voting rights. AerCap owns many of the Dreamliner aircraft previously used by Norwegian on long-haul routes between the US and Europe. The company previously said they were reluctant participants in the deal. And according to the agreement, the shares are locked for trading right away. They will be released in several parts later in 2020. So before the Oslo Stock Exchange opened on Wednesday, Norwegian released a statement confirming the restructuring plan was completed and that the full package of loan guarantees from the Norwegian government had been approved. However, the value of the shares dropped by 50% in just 10 minutes after the exchange opened. They recovered slightly, but were still down by around 30% at 10:30 a.m. The fall in price was expected due to the drastic increase in the number of shares following the restructure. Norwegian CEO Jakob Schram said that the restructuring gives the airline a platform to continue, but pointed out the challenges ahead. He said the months ahead will remain challenging and with a high degree of uncertainty for the industry. Norwegian will still need to collaborate closely with a number of creditors as the company currently has limited revenues. And the limited revenue looks set to continue for many months, of course. Prior to the restructure, Schram announced that the company would be operating in hibernation mode for the remainder of 2020 and that full operations will not resume until 2022. That tells you all you need to know about running an airline, doesn't it? How easy it is to get into, those sort of debts. And was it Richard Branson or was it somebody else that said, if you want to make $1 million in an airline, start off with $1 billion?
Right.
So it shows you that there's some seriously large financial institutions and even governments now getting involved in backing these airlines.
Yeah.
Armando, you've flown Norwegian, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Norwegian. I like their product. I like their crews. I like their aircraft. And, I hope that they come out through this. Everybody's struggling through this, but I don't know. I have a personal affinity to Norwegian Airlines. I've used it quite a bit to get back and forth from the US to the UK. So,
I mean, my only concern is that there seems to be rarely are we covering a story involving Norwegian, about them sort of running out of money or things like that. I mean, it's like, at what point do you sort of stop bailing them out? If you see what I mean, this is the challenge, I guess. But it's
I think this is exactly why the lessors are coming to the rescue. Is they're going to take a stake in this and right. See where it goes from there.
Okay, so I mean, they're not being funny. I mean, these people wouldn't be willing to invest in it, either by being involved in the leasing process or whatever. I mean, people wouldn't be willing to invest if they didn't see something in their model. Do you know what I mean? So there must be something in it, otherwise people wouldn't be, willing to invest.
Yeah, and I'm not a banker by any means, but it makes you wonder if the People's Republic of China, the government, is behind the Bank of China and they're now a major investor, then does that guarantee that we'll see Norwegian in the skies for the near future?
I mean, what do you think, Nev? I mean, is it something worth saving? I mean...
Well, I think everybody agrees that doing low-cost transatlantic fares is challenging, and there's no two ways about it. I think the model for that works well in North America, it works well in Asia, works well in Australia, New Zealand, and works very well in Europe for those sort of 1 to 4 hour flights using A320s or 737s. When you start using Dreamliners and A350s, if they get that kind of product one these days, it's a whole new ball game, because you're into a whole load of huge costs associated with the aircraft, and you've really got to make the load factors work. And if they don't, and they take a bit of a hit, and they take a bit of a hit for something like the coronavirus thing, for example, which affects everybody, that's something which is difficult to recover from quickly, isn't it? Yeah. And there's a lot of extra stuff involved flying across the North Atlantic in terms of costs and landing agreements and fees and handling and all the rest of it, compared to some of the European operations. So I do hope they survive. I've got to say that, because I think that it'd be nice to have a low-cost airline doing the North Atlantic routes.
Indeed, actually, I will just say that John just put some information in the show notes here saying that Norwegian have been struggling for a while. We've covered that. But it's investment by writing off debt in return for shares, essentially, is how they're doing. So the shares are down by 93% over last year. And in case you were wondering, of the chain of BOC Aviation to the People's Republic of China, BOC Aviation is a company controlled by Sky Splendor Limited, which in turn is controlled by the Bank of China Group Investment Limited, which in turn is controlled by the Bank of China Limited, which in turn is controlled by the central, some word I can't pronounce, investment, Huijin, thank you, Huijin Investment Limited, which in turn is controlled by China Investment Corporation, which is owned by the government of the People's Republic of China, BOC Aviation Limited.
And that tells you all you need to know, really, doesn't it?
So that's clear as mud then. Yes, excellent. So there we are. We all learned a lot from that story. It's very complicated.
You've done well, Matt. Well done. Big round of applause.
Yeah, I feel like I was getting tested on a fuel system or something like that. It goes from... That's the ultimate check ride question. You're a drop of fuel. Where'd you go? From the fuel truck to the exhaust. Ready, go.
Yeah, go. Yes, absolutely. Anyway, enough of this. Armando, you're next, yes.
Yeah, guys, good news, bad news, good news, bad news. This one's bad news. So aircraft engine maker Rolls-Royce has just announced that they're cutting at least 9,000 jobs because of the collapse in demand for air travel caused by the pandemic. We are proposing a major reorganization of our business to adapt to the new level of demand we are seeing from our customers, the company said. As a result, we expect the loss of at least 9,000 roles from our global workforce of 52,000 individuals. Rolls-Royce said its civil aerospace business, which is concentrated in the UK, makes engines for Boeing and Airbus and will bear the brunt of the restructuring. The division accounted for more than half of the group's revenue in 2019. We haven't completely concluded on exactly where the job losses will be because we have to consult with our unions, but it's fair to say that our civil aerospace business, approximately 2/3 of the employees, which are in the UK at the moment, said the CEO, Warren East, on the BBC. The company said it will take several years for the commercial aerospace market to return to the levels seen just a few months ago, and it needed to adjust its capacity to meet the reduced demand. And for me, this is an example of, we tend to talk about the crews, the flight crews, the pilots, the cabin crew, but this is a second and third order effect of this slowdown in air travel, where many contributors to the industry are affected by this.
Yeah, it's I guess it's one of those, isn't it? It's a little bit inevitable if people aren't flying, if people aren't, therefore, deliveries aren't being made, apart from a handful.
And also, I mean, Rolls have really been through it, haven't they? What with the Trent 1000 engine problems, now this, and it's the perfect storm, isn't it? It's the holes in the Swiss cheese lining up.
Yeah.
I suppose it's doesn't help as well as the 380s. You've got 4 of those on a 380. If you're getting rid of the 380s and going on to 2-engined aircraft, then that's essentially, that's a big loss of engines there.
Sure.
Yeah, it is. Because we did cover it sort of briefly on 317, episode 317, where we said that the airplane maker employs 52,000 people worldwide, 23,000 of which are staff here in the UK. So it's going to be quite a, chunk of that, isn't it? It's not good, is it? Anyway, we need to sort of try and keep things light. Carlos, we'll leave you to move on with what can I describe as a spate of these of late.
Yeah, actually, Matt, I was going to just quickly say I love that background. That's very nice.
Right. Okay. Yes, I think it was sent to us by John Jester. Is that correct?
Yes. John Jester. Thanks for that.
He didn't like the machines from Hogwarts, did he?
Egg whisks or whatever he said. Yeah.
Or whatever he's calling them there. So there we are. So we've got an Atlas Air behind me instead.
So this next story, we've all had a few wardrobe malfunctions in our times, but this is something, a fire suppression system malfunction. So as Matt said, we've had about 50 million of these in the last few weeks. I think it's a weekly occurrence now. But this is on simpleflying.com, and a dramatic video circulating shows a fire suppression system malfunctioning in an American Airlines hangar holding 2 Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft. Both aircraft were quickly covered in special firefighting foam, and the video shows the fire suppression system malfunction that covered the aircraft, and the foam is seen spraying directly onto the aircraft and some other equipment. However, there does not appear to be any people in the videos or underneath the foam sprays, and the incident caused quite a mess. And it's safe to say it did cause a mess because the videos are terrible. But Simple Flying reached out to American Airlines for additional details. American confirmed that there was no damage, no injuries to any employees. And the malfunction, however, does require a massive cleanup.
You think?
For safety reasons, aircraft hangars are equipped with fire suppression systems. The foam method is especially effective in the case of a fire. It can be quickly released and effectively coat most of the hangar and drastically reduce fire damage. In a hangar, there are plenty of obstructions like aircraft, scaffolding jacks, and other equipment that can make traditional firefighting techniques difficult. Moreover, any other fire involving jet fuel can cause significant damage. The motto, better safe than sorry, registers strongly in the aviation industry. It's unclear what caused the incident to occur. Likely the system was triggered accidentally. However, sometimes this foam system is set off intentionally, either as a real-world emergency or a test for demonstration. For example, here is a fire. There's a video here that on this story, which you can click on. The links will be in the show notes. There's a story here, a video that shows a WestJet 787 hangar with the foam suppression system. So these planes will be likely to stay on the ground now for a little while longer after being cleaned. American engineers will probably need to inspect both the aircraft thoroughly. Any leftover residue could be consequential during flight. Incidents like these have occurred in the past. A couple of weeks ago, you may remember, on this show we talked about BA that suffered a similar event on the 777 in the hangar. And at the end of March, Delta had a hangar incident at LAX where they suffered an accidental foam discharge.
Now, I was literally going to say this, and then Nick Codling in the chat room here basically beat me to it. He's saying, is it just me, or does anyone else just want to run right through that? Foam party!
Yes.
Yeah.
We need some big DJ.
I can say I've been to many a foam party back in my youth. Do you
think we should try this Saturday, Matt?
Phone party?
Yeah.
The kitchen disco.
What? So we're going to ask all of your loyal
shameless
listeners.
Shameless plug.
Honestly, what all they got to do? Put fairy liquid in the dishwasher? What? How are they going to do it at home? Like,
is that how you do it?
That's one method, possibly. I don't know. Worth a try. Okay. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with aviation. We'll move on.
That might get me a divorce if I do that.
Yeah. You don't need any help. Let's be honest. There we go. It's like Masha's also saying foam party. For some reason that's the only thing with this system. Look, it misses out the emoticons on the end. We'll have to look into that.
But okay, guys, that's what we're going to do then. For the 400th show, we'll hire a hangar and we'll have a big foam park.
I'd break out my mankini for that, actually. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Like it.
I've got images in my head now. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, we're going to have to, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, John's got his work cut out this week, clipping all of these errors, shall we say it. But never mind. All part of the fun. Who's going next? Oh, it's me,
Matt,
is it?
The next story, this one is this one's for you. This is all about Etihad.
Yes, indeed. Simple Flying is the website, and the headline is Etihad operates historic first flight to Israel. So Etihad Airways today made history, operating the first flight by United Arab Emirates airline to Israel. The flight carried 14 tons of urgent medical supplies bound for Palestine. So the current pandemic has seen its fair share of record-breaking flights. However, today saw the first known flight of an airline registered in the UAE that has ever touched down in Israel, according to Reuters. The historic flight was carrying medical equipment such as PPE and respirators. The United Nations arranged for 14 tons of such aid to be transferred from the UAE into Palestine. So the flight details tracking today's flight to Tel Aviv proved to be tricky indeed. While Flight Radar 24 has a record of an Etihad flight touching down in Tel Aviv at 21:12 local time, the flight tracking service appears to have no history of the actual flight. However, Flight Aware does seem to have been able to track the flight. The service shows a path for the plane from Abu Dhabi to Tel Aviv, albeit with a break-in signal in the middle. The aircraft was reported as leaving Abu Dhabi at around 16:03. The flight tracking service then shows the aircraft flying up through the Persian Gulf before flying over Kuwait, Iraq, and then either Syria or Turkey. This part of the flight was not tracked, before flying under very indirect southerly route across Cyprus and down to Tel Aviv. The flight landed in Tel Aviv at after 4 hours and 11 minutes at 09:14 local time. Flight Aware confirmed to Simple Flying that the aircraft utilised was A6 Echo Yankee Papa, an Etihad Airbus A330. So it's a historic flight. The UAE, along with many Middle Eastern nations, doesn't have diplomatic relations with Israel. As such, commercial flights don't operate between the two countries. However, in December 2018, we reported that Oman had opened its airspace to Israeli flag carrier El Al. In recent years, the ice between Israel and the Middle East has been gradually thawing. Today's flight could show a further thaw in relations between the UAE and Israel. Specifically, the trip was the first known to have been operated to Israel by a United Arab Emirates airline. Could this pave the way for future flight operations? That's something we cannot answer. So it was a cargo of medical aid. According to Reuters, the United Nations has organised for a shipment of medical aid, including PPE and 10 respirators, to be sent from the UAE to Palestine. And there's a sort of a brief statement here. Etihad Airways continues to operate many humanitarian flights, providing such needed aid to nations within its network and beyond. Many Etihad passenger aircrafts are being utilised for belly cargo only to deliver commercial freight and other supplies across its global network. Etihad Airways operated a dedicated humanitarian cargo flight from Abu Dhabi to Tel Aviv on the 19th of May to provide medical supplies to the Palestinians. The flight had no passengers on board. I mean, what do we make of this story then, guys? How do we, this? I mean, this has got to be good news, isn't it? Do you think it will thaw relations, perhaps, between the countries?
Yeah, I think so. And there's so many flights that can't take place because there's no diplomatic relations between various countries and no arrangements set up to do that. So when there's a breakthrough like this, and of course the thing can get chopped from if that all falls apart, unfortunately. But I think that's a very good news story where they're starting to operate a service which traditionally or previously couldn't be operated because the governments were barely talking to each other.
Indeed, it's got to be a step in the right direction, as you're saying.
So moving on to the next story number 11. This week, Nev, and some more sad news, I think, for A380 lovers.
Yeah, it's like Armando was saying earlier. It's good news followed by a bad news story, and vice versa, isn't it? This is on the aerospcworld.com. We mentioned it earlier. Air France are going to retire its entire A380 fleet from service. And the French flag carrier had already planned to retire these aircraft in 2022 before the outbreak of the current coronavirus pandemic. Eventually, the carrier announced to retire them in response to this crisis. Along with the announcement of the end of the A380 ops, the Air France KLM consortium also announced a €500 million write-down to reflect the early retirement of the Super Jumbos. The airline also stated this expense will be booked in the second quarter of 2020 as a non-current cost/expense. Air France operated 10 of these aircraft at its peak time. However, the carrier had already retired one of them, which made its final journey to Knock in Ireland. Now, after this retirement of the first 380 earlier this year, this left the French carrier with 9 units at the beginning of the corona crisis. 2 different ownership types are involved with Air France's Airbus A380 fleet. 5 of the A380s are owned by Air France on a finance lease, whilst the remaining 4 are on a operating lease owned by Dr. Peters Group. These Super Jumbos will be replaced by newer, more fuel-efficient and cost-saving aircraft, including Airbus A350s and Boeing 787, whose deliveries are ongoing. I don't know whether you get the same adverts that I do in your stories. As I come to the end of this story, the very next thing that it shows me is an advert. It says, "Fun bras for women over 50." I don't know if that's helpful.
I think that may be more to do with your search history, Nev. I've got to be honest.
Perhaps it might be. Perhaps it might be. You never know.
Because it's all about the cookie data.
I think that half the stories that Carlos finds in some of these websites, I pause when I'm reading them because of the advertisements that come on there, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't make eye contact with anybody right now.
But actually, just going back seriously for a second, I mean, do you remember the high fly A380 that we saw at Farnborough?
Yes.
Talking to the folks there. Now, I wonder if they will retire theirs early, or whether they will actually have utilisation on it. We talked about it on the 300th episode, and one of the problems that they have is that there's only a certain number of airports set up to deal with the aircraft. So. Yeah, and of course the other thing now is, with what's happened with the coronavirus pandemic, is utilisation of the aircraft themselves and the load factors. Because if you want to whiz around in an A380, you don't want to have 200 people on it, do you? You'll need 450 people on it, or very close to it.
I'll tell you what, if you were going to start an airline up now, or in a year's time, and you wanted to have just a pure A380 fleet and you had the money to buy them, the second-hand market is going to be, well...
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to whiz through a couple of comments actually in the chat room here, and I'm with Tony, and I know I'm very much with Tony S on this one, and we covered this sort of, I think, was it last week, where we were talking about the A380F, and he's saying surely there has to be some money to be made from an A380 cargo conversion. When you think, I mean, how popular the 747 is for cargo. I mean, and it's still very much beloved by most cargo operators, and that, I'm amazed that there hasn't been more of a thing, for the freighter version of this, the A380F. And Aaron P is sort of saying actually the A380 will be kept for slot constrained airports. He's suggesting London Heathrow as a possible example. I don't know. I mean, is there any legs in that, Nev, do you think?
Yeah, certainly. If where there's a airport with slot constraints, although of course at the moment they're down to single runway operation,
yes.
And not a problem. But when we all come back to, and obviously it was 99% capacity, but then you've got the other thing going on with BA still talking about pulling out of Gatwick altogether, which I do find amazing. I will be really surprised if that actually goes ahead, but we'll have to see. It certainly solves that problem. But of course, the A380, you don't want to use it on the London to Frankfurt route. You want to use it on the Hong Kong, Singapore, and beyond routes, and then West Coast, LA, and onwards to New Zealand, probably. So,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Also, I guess it's a backhanded compliment, possibly. Nev from Lane Street in the chat room says there's no way that Nev has a 50-inch chest. So there you are.
I think that is a very true statement. However, the way I'm going with this lockdown and food consumption, that could happen at any moment.
Anything's possible. Yeah. John Jester in the chat room is saying, but not the BCFs. They're like the 747 freighter versions because of the lift, or they like the 747 freighter because of the lift. They don't like the BCFs because of weight and handling restrictions. God, there's always somebody who has to sort of spoil the party, isn't there? With sensible excuses.
Let's be honest here that the A380 is never going to look as good as the 74. Whatever you do to it.
I don't know. Sorry, Armando, what were you going to say?
I'll agree with that, right? The 747 will always be the queen of the skies. But I just wanted, John has become a contributor to the show, and I always appreciate his comments in the chat room. I want to remind everybody that I've known John Jester for almost 30 years. He was one of my mentors, or one of my bosses, and I've always kept in touch with him over the evolution of my aviation and military career. So I just want to say how happy I am that John is in the chat room and contributing to both us and that other podcast. Which
you can say it out loud. It's all right. We don't mind.
I suppose the APG guys.
I've never heard of the airplane geeks. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, the airplane geeks. No, it's just always really good to see him in the chat room, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. And one thing with John, in the near future, we're going to feature a segment with him about his role in the, the investigation process of how a company analyzes mishaps and the toll that it takes on both the company and the industry. So you guys should be looking forward to that. Yeah, we'll have that in the next sort of month or two. And I'm sure it'll be just both enlightening and sobering at the same time.
Brilliant. Can't wait for that. Actually, while you've got the mic, Armando, you are up next.
Yeah, we'll go to a good story. So the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich have found a way to make fuels from sunlight and air. I think we have both of those. And
at least at the moment, I don't think the pandemic has done anything to those.
Yeah.
Other than make air poisonous, of course.
Well, we'll see. So first to the door is Lufthansa. The Lufthansa group of companies are joining the scientists to help prepare these technologies for production on an industrial scale into the future. ETH Zurich found how to make liquid hydrocarbon fuels from water with the help of concentrated sunlight. I believe that's probably like concentrated orange juice. During the process, CO2 and water are extracted directly from the ambient air and split using solar energy, according to the Institute. The output of the process is a synthesis gas, which can be subsequently processed into kerosene, methanol, or other hydrocarbons to be used as jet fuel. The fuel only releases as much CO2 as was previously extracted from the atmosphere, as Lufthansa highlights. On May 18, 2020, the Lufthansa Group and ETH Zurich announced the signing of a joint letter of intent for possible cooperation to ultimately help accelerate the market launch of sustainable aviation fuels. Lufthansa Group subsidiaries Swiss and Edelweiss are planning to cooperate with the scientists in the area of technology and economic efficiency. More importantly, the companies plan to settle for SAF quotas, although only later. There you go. So this could be the next leap in aviation. I think we're on the cusp of a revolution in electric propulsion, and I think this biofuels or sustainable fuels is probably going to be the next revolution after that.
This could have sort of like a knock-on effect for transportation in general, though, couldn't it? I mean, you think road users as well could benefit if they can generate it in enough volume. could have interesting, implications. Anything to make fuel cheaper, frankly. But perhaps I'm a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about kerosene, methanol, and hydrocarbons, like that's could potentially be the way we fuel the future. Ooh, yeah, you should tag that.
Yeah,
fuel
absolutely.
the future.
Yeah, John,
PTUK.
Clip that, please. Excellent. Very good. Yeah, we'll watch this with great interest. See if anything comes up. There we are. That's the commercial done then.
Certainly is. Next thing you know, I'll be producing fuel from thin air. Anyway, moving swiftly on to the next part of the show, and we're going to hand things over to Nev, because Nev's got a very special little segment for us again this week.
Yes, thanks, Carlos. Well, as you know, we're not doing air shows at the moment.
Oh, we don't.
Having said that, the Malta air show is still on, so I'm really hopeful that we will be going there at the end of September. Whether we'll get back or not is another story, but that will suit you, Carlos, quite nicely, won't it? I'm sure. But, we'll have to see how that goes, but fingers crossed. But as I say, there's no aviation shows going on in the UK at the moment at all, so what I've done is put together another highlights package for your enjoyment.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Hello everyone, Nev here.
Oh, I'm enjoying myself so much, man. There's some lovely people here, you know.
Isn't it?
Yeah, shame I haven't met any of them yet.
Right. Okay. Yeah, all strangers.
I have not had one drink since I've been here. I've had probably dozens, maybe even over 100.
Now, of course, this is the most important part on any Airbus aircraft as far as Al is concerned, somewhere where he can eat his lunch.
Very much so. There will be countless thousands of pilots out there who've tried to wrestle with their dinner on a tray on a paper tacklog, only to spill their soup or wherever they happen to be eating all over their lap. I'm feeling very much at home here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the general Airbus concept, the idea is that you can cross the entire range. Perfect timing.
Oh, Nev, I'll tell you what, every time you put one of these together, I watch them 3 or 4 times at least, and it's so many, honestly, the memories are so great, and we had such good time, we met so many fantastic people, but it does bring a bloody tear to my eye.
Yeah, we've had some great times at these air shows, not just with the aircraft flying, but the meetups that we've had, the interviews that we've done. So we're fortunate, and we've got all this back catalogue to fall back on as well. But I have to say, I would prefer to be going to the real events rather than doing this. But nonetheless, there'll be another highlights package next week.
Can't wait. I really can't. It's going to be good.
Matt, your T-shirt has been noticed in the chat.
Oh, is it? Oh, I'm going to have to stand up now, aren't I? Okay, here we go. Right, so yes, Carlos dropped off socially distancing, obviously, dropped off a T-shirt on me this week. Nick Codling's just spotted it in the chat room here. Hang on, I'll see if I can get close enough. This is going to work great on an audio podcast area. Anyway, what it does say is, have you tried turning it off and on again? It's an IT Crowd T-shirt. It's very appropriate for me, let's be honest. Anyway, nobody really cares about that. Shall we move on?
So we're going to hand things over. Oh, that's a great T-shirt. We're going to hand things over to our resident military expert, Armando.
All right, guys, let's knock out some military. Let's do it. Fellas, all of us in aviation and in our own personal lives have those people to which we look up to. And Nick Anderson, who is just a wonderful part of this aviation podcast community, and specifically APG and us, he's had an enviable aviation career, and he's just a wonderful person to be around. I think all of us just cherish every minute that we spend with Nick, just because he's just a wealth of information and just a great person to be around. And I think it's important for all of us to have those mentors in our lives, and it's great to have a little bit of insight into the people that shaped Nick into the person that he is. So our PTUK family and the entire rest of the aviation podcast community would like to extend our condolences to Nick on the passing of his father, Andy. And there's no better way to honor him than to use Nick's own words. So I'll just read from something that Nick wrote. Andy became a part of a generation of pilots who took on responsibility well before they were ready, but who rose to the challenge and surpassed it. He was anxious to get into the fight. He left the beautiful shores of Australia to join the Royal Air Force chaps who were standing alone against the might of Hitler. Rather than wait for the opportunity to become a glamorous fighter pilot, he chose his first chance to get into the fight on the Sunderland flying boats of No. 10 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, based at Plymouth in the west of England. Eventually, as the cheers of VE Day rang around Plymouth Hoe, the future could be considered. It started back home on the Douglas DC-2 out of Perth in Western Australia, but after several frustrating years, his career continued back in England with the Vickers Viking from Blackbush Airport. This poorly equipped aircraft, barely able to warrant the description of an airliner, took passengers thousands of miles across the empty, scorched expanse of the African deserts and through the fertile plains all the way down from London to Harare. No GPS in those times, no up-to-the-minute weather forecast, just a map and a compass. With the arrival of the jet age came the chance to captain one of the world's most beautiful airliners, the Vickers VC-10, one of the most advanced airlines in the world. At the time, it was a delight to fly. He left the country to work in Kuwait, and after a while was the 707 fleet manager. He fulfilled his dream to fly one of the most wonderful airliners of this era, the Boeing 747, an aircraft that he loved. And again, that's just a quick excerpt from something that Nick wrote up. So Nick, you are a part of our family, and you have so much of an influence that you probably don't even realize. So our condolences to you, sir.
Absolutely. I think we speak for everyone who's listening to this, this show, anyone in the community, that obviously we're all thinking of you, Nick, and much love as always.
I definitely agree with Richard Adams in the chat room, because I did listen to those interviews that Nick done with Andy as well, and they were very, very good interviews that he done with his father.
I also get the feeling that Nick takes after his dad as well. And whilst it would have been fascinating to have spoken to his father, we're almost not quite the same thing, obviously, but just talking to Nick and listening to some of his history of flying, both in the military and commercially, you can see where he got his passion for aviation from, can't you?
Absolutely. So with that, guys, if you don't mind, we'll carry on. This is another sort of sad story. It's just been a weird week in the aviation military demonstration team world. So this first story comes to us from Canada, and most everyone in the aviation community already knows this, but I'll read a little story from military.com. In Vancouver, British Columbia, a team of military investigators has arrived on last Monday to begin searching for answers into the deadly Snowbirds jet crash, which the aerobatics team commander described as a confluence of worst-case scenarios and an absolute worst nightmare. The 8-member flight investigation team was deployed from Ottawa to Kalumps, where one of the Snowbirds Tudor jets went down shortly after takeoff. The Snowbirds have been in the midst of a cross-country tour aimed at boosting morale, during the COVID-19 pandemic. One Canadian Armed Forces member, Captain Jennifer Casey, a spokesperson, was killed while another, Captain Richard McDougall, was piloting the aircraft, and he sustained serious but non-life-threatening injuries. During a news conference at 15 Wing Moose Jaw in Saskatchewan, where the Snowbirds are based, Team Commander Lieutenant Colonel Mike French said that the cross-country tour known as Operation Inspiration had been suspended while the team's tutor jets are subject to an operational pause. The spokesman would not speculate as to the cause of the crash, but insisted that safety is the Snowbirds' #1 priority. He added that each aircraft is torn down and rebuilt about every 2 years and subject to regular maintenance checks prior to every flight. The crash was the second for the Snowbirds since October, and the second involving Canadian Air Force aircraft in as many months after a Cyclone helicopter went down in the Ionian Sea, April 29th, killing all 6 people aboard. We'll just kind of leave it there. Yeah.
Tony's actually saying in the chat room, so sad because actually she was at RIAT in 2018.
Yeah, Captain Casey was a public affairs officer, so she travels with the team. She is the face of the team, for lack of a better term. She's the one that interacts with both the public and the media. So that being said, Matt, if you're ready to play this video, this is one of those things where we continue to say that there is an inherent risk to aviation, but these teams and some of these military operations are on the cutting edge of and on the edge of the performance envelopes of the aircraft. So this video that we're about to play out is from the Thunderbirds. They were also doing a flyover in support of the COVID-19 healthcare workers, and you can see their exceptional skill as they experienced a wind, what is likely a wind shear.
400 miles an hour, and you're sitting still, and they blend in. You know, they're white. They blend in with the background there. It can be extremely difficult to pick them up, but you could tell this shot is really clear as they fly by. They're just coming up right now on the Newport Beach area, and from there, I think what we're going to see is them make a bit of a turn. Once they get a little south of Newport, they're going to go east and head out towards Riverside County. And there's the turn there. Boy, look at that. That is some cool stuff.
Wow. Okay, so what phenomenal. Happened there, Armando?
So
what's that all about?
The best of the best right
well,
there.
it's likely that they just experienced some kind of wind shear or some kind of event. I believe that's Thunderbirds 3 and 6. And as soon as the formation started sort of coming apart, you saw their exceptional discipline in flying. As soon as he saw that airplane, his wingman, not where it's supposed to be, he immediately conducted a brake maneuver to get some space between him and the other guy. But it's a testament to the skill of these guys and the amount of concentration that goes into formation flying. Apparently,
John's just saying in my ear, apparently there was an aircraft in the flight path, which is why they were having to do it. A little helicopter apparently is how come they had to take evasive action.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that here in the last story of this segment, where we'll talk about the Blue Angels. But we'll just talk about another team, the Red Arrows, my favorite.
I've heard of them.
Oh, gosh. Did I just say that? I didn't say that. Yeah, my favorite, the Red Arrows, they've just announced this week that they are moving from RAF Scampton up to RAF Waddington. And if I remember right, I've been up to Waddington once. It's a beautiful part of the UK, isn't it?
I actually did my first ever audio piece into Plain Talking UK from the Waddington Air Show, believe it or not. I sent Carlos an audio clip long before I actually joined the team back in the day. Yes. One of these days we'll find it. It was probably horrendous. Yeah.
You guys can correct me, but it's up in Yorkshire, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Sort of like the East Anglia end, if you like. It's not sort of deepest Yorkshire, but Apparently, it was episode 31. I'm being told in my ear was the episode. So that gives you an idea of how long ago it was.
Well, this is estimated to save the team about 3 billion pounds in savings by the year 2040. But if I remember correctly, that the Yorkshire Dales are just beautiful, and it's I would ride my motorcycle over there, and it's just one of the prettiest parts of.
Just stop being so damn cool, please, Armando. It's exhausting.
I have a funny story about that, though. My motorcycle went dead because I put in that your fuel nozzles are different colors than in the U.S.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, a Ducati doesn't run so well with diesel in it.
Yeah.
It's all right. The AA rescued me and took me back to the deepest, darkest corners of East Anglia.
Lovely, yes.
Yeah, so as we were just saying, these flyovers are not without risk. And the very last story that we're going to have in this little segment is the FAA is investigating the Detroit flyover where a drone flight came dangerously close to the Blue Angels. A remotely piloted camera drone took footage of the Blue Angels over the city of Detroit on May 12th on their America Strong flyover of the metro area. According to an article on The Aviationist, the drone came dangerously close to the aircraft and was within feet of the formation at one point. This person that wrote the story is an expert in military aviation, has an extensive military background. The FAA spokesperson confirmed that the agency is aware of the incident and regarding the drone and is under investigation. As you can see in the video there, they're great from certified operators, certified drone operators, but this one unlicensed drone operator put his aircraft, do we call them aircraft? It is a craft in the air, I suppose, and right in the path of these aircraft and came dangerously close to their flight path.
It's just, I my words fail me really. It's such a, so we're coming up to the part that we're talking about here. If you're watching the YouTube version, where you can see, look how close this drone is to the actual aircraft. That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Here we go. It's coming past again in slightly slow motion.
Yeah,
it's so close. Look at that. That is just like, don't get me wrong. I acknowledge it's a great shot, but that could have, if that had caught one of the aircraft, who knows where it could have ended up and the damage that could have potentially been done there, right? And I've got, everybody knows I've got a little drone. I'm all registered. I'm done with the CAA. I passed my little exam and all that kind of thing. I love flying my little drone, especially in lockdown. It's one of the few things that gives me enjoyment. But I'd like to think that anybody who's done said test wouldn't be stupid enough to try and take a shot like that.
I can't believe I can't believe that anybody would think that that's a good idea to put their drone in the path of those aircraft. And they're probably only doing 180 knots or so. And there's no way that those pilots are going to see that little. No. So, no. Unbelievable.
Genuinely though, is it likely to cause, say one did strike, say it did sort of, their path was down slightly, or the wing caught it and it went up or whatever. Is it likely to cause what sort of damage is likely to have been caused by said drone to a fighter like that?
Well, the worst would be if it was ingested into the engine intake. That could certainly cause some damage, as these drones are, especially some of the professional ones, are pretty big, probably a little bit bigger than most of us think. But even just a dent in the wing or taking out a panel. We just saw the Thunderbirds and how they have to react to a challenge while they're flying. It's that chain of events, right? So sure, would a drone cause enough damage to bring down an airplane? No, but could it damage a flight control enough to move it enough where that aircraft is now out of place in its formation,
of course,
potentially hitting another aircraft? If you were to suffer an engine loss, now these are amazing pilots and they have a contingency plan for everything, but if you were to suffer an engine loss when you're only flying 3 feet, just the amount of movement in the aircraft as that aerodynamics are being affected could be enough to now possibly bring down 2 or more aircraft. It's just unbelievable to me that anybody would think this is a great idea.
Agreed.
And I hope they get prosecuted. I hope they find them and get prosecuted. So.
Yes, of course. So there is always the risk, though, as I say. Like, I mean, I have to put stickers on my drone that people can clearly identify who I am by using the code that's on there. Of course, there is no guarantee that the person with this drone has got the appropriate, paperwork, if you like, attached to their drone. I mean, you've got, it's.
I'd like to think that if you're paying upwards of £500, £600, £700, up to £1,000 or more for a high end, for a high end DJI drone, I'm hopeful that if you had that money to spend on something like that you'd be fairly clued up and good with said device. So.
Okay.
Next story in the military segment is it's all doom and gloom this week, honestly. Some sad news. This is on military.com. An F-22 Raptor crashed last Friday morning during a routine training flight near Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. The F-22, assigned to the 325th Fighter Wing, crashed at approximately 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time. Jasmine Porterfield, a spokesperson for the base, told military.com. The pilot was able to eject safely and is being evaluated by the 96th Medical Group at the base, she said, and the crash occurred roughly 12 miles northeast of Eglin on the test and training range, and no injuries have been reported. And on Tuesday last week, an F-35A Joint Strike Fighter crashed at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, Tuesday evening following a routine nighttime training flight, according to the Air Force. The F-35A Lightning II, assigned to the 58th Fighter Squadron of the 33rd Fighter Wing, crashed at around 9:30 p.m. local time upon landing. Base officials said in a release. The pilot, who is in a stable condition, successfully ejected and was transported to the 96th Medical Group Hospital at Eglin for evaluation and monitoring. There was no loss of life or damage to civilian property, the release also said, and the name of the pilot is not being released at this time, and the incident is under investigation. The 33rd Fighter Wing is the leading training wing for the F-35 student pilot at the base. Although the F-35 is the Pentagon's newest and most advanced aircraft, the oldest Joint Strike Fighters in the fleet reside at Eglin. The planes are part of Lockheed Martin's earliest low-rate initial production batches. The pilot was able to eject safely and had been evaluated by the 96th Medical Group, and the crash occurred roughly, again, 12 miles northeast of Eglin on the test and training range. An investigation into that mishap is also ongoing, the officials said. The latest F-35 incident marks the second American F-35 crash that occurred stateside in 2 years' time. In September 2018, Marine Corps F-35B, assigned to Marine Fighter Attack Training Squadron 501, crashed near Beaufort, South Carolina. The pilot was able to eject. Following the crash, the Pentagon grounded all service variants of the stealth fighter, citing the need to inspect potentially faulty fuel tubes within the engine before the aircraft were allowed to take to the skies again. In April 2019, last year, the F-35A variant belonging to Japan, I think we covered this actually, crashed about half an hour after taking off from Misawa Air Force Base. The Japanese Air Self-Defense Force, or the JASDF, concluded that the pilot experienced vertigo or spatial disorientation during the flight, which was the reason behind the pilot of the fifth generation jet that was unable to rectify the aircraft's course, ultimately plunging into the Pacific Ocean. Wow, it's definitely a busy time, I think, in the military for incidents, Armando.
Yeah, to quote Tony S. in the chat room, it's an expensive week for the United States Air Force.
I don't think there's any disagreement there, yes. Not been a good week, it has to be said.
But they ejected safely, that's the point to make, is that the guys got out and they're safe, which is always the best outcome.
I do. Typical Nick here. To lose one might be considered careless. ...
Well, there's certainly some scrutiny when you put down a $150 million jet into the dirt.
Well, yes.
So someone will have to answer for something at some point.
Yes, absolutely. And someone may have to get a checkbook out at some point to put it all right. Anyway, on to the next story. This is in Flying in Ireland, and the headline is New Transport Aircraft for the Irish Air Corps. As reported in some media outlets, now somebody help me with this. The Taoiseach and Minister... Sorry? Okay.
Taoiseach.
Okay. What?
Taoiseach.
Okay. Sorry. The producer said it 3 times in my ear. I still didn't get it.
You mean Taoiseach is what you're
Taoiseach.
Okay.
Taoiseach.
Okay, anyway, that word, and the Minister for Defence, Leo, will miss out his surname for the same reason. Varadkar. I think the producer has stitched me up. I've obviously been bad in some way.
I think this is the first time that we're doing a military story that it's not the technical terms that are throwing you. It's
just the boring old names. Yes. Anyway, great. So the Irish Prime Minister, let's go with that, has asked the Defence Forces to examine the possible acquisition of a military transport aircraft. With the exception of Cyprus and Malta, Ireland is the only country in the EU that doesn't have its own dedicated military transport aircraft. The need for a transport aircraft has come to light in recent times as troops away with United Nations peacekeeping duties have been unable to return home due to travel restrictions arising from COVID-19. Currently, Irish troops have to be transported by commercial operators or on other foreign military transport aircraft. Recently, a number of Irish troops serving with the EU's training mission in Mali had to return home via Madrid on a Spanish Air Force flight and then continued on to Baldonnel in an Irish Air Corps. Is it CASA? C-A-S-A? I quit.
That's correct.
I quit.
CASA.
That's I give up. Anyway, whilst the Irish Air Corps does have 2 CASA CN-235 aircraft, these are primarily dedicated to operating maritime patrols and are only made available for other missions when time permits. Both the CN-235s are due to be replaced in 2022 with the arrival of 2 new CASA 295 MP aircraft. The only other aircraft in the fleet with a transport capability is the Learjet 45. While it offers relatively fast transits, its small cabin and limited range means that it is really only suitable for shuttling around Europe. In an attempt to add some additional capacity in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Irish Air Corps agreed a deal to purchase an additional Pilatus PC-12 at short notice in March. The new PC-12 has been involved in numerous missions, such as transporting coronavirus tests to a laboratory in Germany and the repatriation of Irish Defence Forces personnel from Kosovo. The Irish Air Corps are due to accept delivery for a further 3 Pilatus PC-12 aircraft later this year. They will be used in the intelligence, surveillance, target acquisition and reconnaissance role. The lack of transport capabilities has existed for years, but the COVID-19 outbreak has highlighted the need for the Defence Forces to have their own capability to move troops and materials.
I'll save you there, Matt.
Okay, thank you.
The CASA 295 is an incredibly capable aircraft. We've talked about it with a couple other air forces, and it's one of these airplanes that's produced by the Spanish. And I believe it's an Airbus program now. It used to be EADS CASA, but somebody, I'm sure the chat room will know. But I do believe it is an Airbus program now, and it's got a ramp and door. It's got the range. It's got reliable engines. It's just a fantastic airplane that can do a little bit of everything. They looked at the C-27J, which there's, I think, a little bit of a surplus of because they didn't really sell as well as they did. They looked at C-130s, some used ones, but if the Irish Air Corps is able to acquire some of these CASA 295s, I think having a cargo role is pretty critical to an Air Force. So if they're going to call themselves an Air Corps, we should probably have something they can move some stuff in. Although the Pilatus PC-12 is a very capable aircraft, you just can't put that much stuff in it.
No, indeed. I'm being told off by Captain Nick Anderson in the chat room here, because apparently I said corpse and it should have been core, so it's not the other one. Yeah, it should have been core and not loads of dead people.
Yeah, we'll give them a pass, Nick. We'll give them a pass.
That's it. I'm never reading military stories ever again. That's it. I'm done.
Boy.
I'll just stay here and press buttons. That I stand less chance of getting that wrong. Never mind. Sorry, Nick, and everyone else.
Well, I'll tell you what, since Carlos is muted, we're going to finish with one last story, and it is brought to us by Nev, who has the best voice of all of us.
Oh,
stop it.
Stop it.
He's so smooth, isn't he?
This is on the space.com website, and another sad story, I'm afraid. Annie Glenn, who's the widow of the late NASA astronaut and US Senator John Glenn, the first American to orbit the Earth, has sadly died, NASA announced. I think it was yesterday. She was 100 years old. We are deeply saddened by the passing of Annie Glenn, a stalwart member of the space and military communities. Her courageous support of her legendary husband, John, was unmatched, NASA officials said in a statement. Annie Glenn died today. Actually, it was May the 19th she passed away at a nursing home near St. Paul, Minnesota, after suffering complications from COVID-19. She was an advocate for people with disabilities and communication disorders, having struggled with a speech impediment for much of her life. She married John Glenn in 1943 and had been his spouse for 73 years when he died at the age of 95 in 2016. On February the 20th, 1962, Annie Glenn watched her husband launch into space on the Mercury Atlas 6 mission. On that mission, John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth when he circled the planet 3 times before safely splashing down into the Atlantic Ocean. As was the case with all of the astronauts' wives, Annie Glenn was thrust into the spotlight when her husband launched on that historic mission. However, she shied away from the media attention because of her stutter. She overcame the speech impairment at age 53 after attending a 3-week treatment program at Hollins Communication Research Institute in Virginia. When John Glenn launched in space again at age 77, becoming the oldest person to ever go into space, Annie Glenn had become more comfortable with her public role and was more willing to speak to the press, the Associated Press reported. She provided an example for other women who followed to face the challenges of being part of our nation's space program and the stress of having spouses in combat, NASA said in the statement. She stood steadfastly by her husband as he took to space once again as the oldest person to orbit the Earth, even as she continued her own lifelong public service on behalf of children, the elderly, and the disabled. The Glenn's dedication to each other is well known, as we look to them as an unmatched example of the strength and compassion that a lifetime of devotion creates. She will be missed, the statement added. That's a very sad story indeed, but gosh, what a lady and what a supportive lady she was. And to be able to go through all of that speech therapy at the age of 53, that must take some doing as well. So, yeah, very, very sad news. But goodness, what a life she and her husband lived.
Actually, there's a great comment here in the chat room, if I may share it with you, from Lisboa Nelson, who's saying, behind, and I'm sure Nick will agree with this as well, behind a great man, there is always a far greater woman. I think that's good advice for all of us. So it's so often the role is sort of underestimated a bit, isn't it? Of those that behind, to be able to do these amazing achievements, you've got to have somebody who understands your drive and your passion, if you like, to allow you to do it almost, don't you? And to sort of push you in the right direction. She sounds like a wonderful lady.
Sure, and there are certainly some unique stresses involved with both aviation, military service, and I can't even imagine, but having an astronaut for a spouse. And one of my greatest achievements when I was in the military and up in the management level was to break down the barriers between spouses and the military members themselves, including them in the command decision-making process, knowing that it is easy to fall into a trap where a spreadsheet drives an operation or numbers drive an operation, but behind every operation you need people, and behind those people and those operators there are the families and the spouses that you need to take into account. And I couldn't agree more. I would not be here without my spouse, as I think most of us would say.
Absolutely. Although Nick has to ruin it by saying, of course, let's not forget that Jilly does indeed have a baseball bat at her disposal. So that I think that helps to focus the mind also.
Well, there's all kinds of different motivation methods, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one that definitely works. There we go. That is the military for this week. Thank you, Armando. Very good. Very good.
No problem. Breaking news. Steph just told me that there's or told everybody in the chat room that there's a tornado warning for Charlotte. So
right. Okay.
Glad I took the tops off the Jeep, Steph.
Yes. Well done. Well done. Happy days.
Yeah.
Didn't you do well? Oh, okay. We're going to move on to the next part of the show now. And Carlos, you're in charge of this.
Yes. This is a story that popped up in the news feeds this week, and I kind of suppose if I set the kind of situation, say you are incredibly well off and you've got your own Vision Jet with your own personal pilot, and you're buzzing along in your Cirrus Vision Jet, chilling out, drinking your fine bottle of Dom Perignon, and the pilot earlier on in the day decided to have the fish. Albeit the dodgy fish, and then collapses at the on the flight deck. So Cirrus Vision Jet have got a system from the makers Garmin, the G3000, and this system, according to all the tech speak, this system will allow the passenger, you who are sitting there with your Dom Perignon, to go up to the flight deck, press one button, and the aircraft will land for you. Taxi along the runways, come to a stop, shut down the engines, and allow you to get off there and then. But I was lucky enough to get in contact with Max Trescott, who most of you will know brings you the Aviation News Talk podcast each week, which is a great little show. And I got hold of Max because Max was lucky enough to be at the unveiling and the kind of premiere of the G3000. So I met up with Max and we had a little conversation earlier on this week. And I started off by asking Max a bit more about the kind of the inner workings of this whole system and what it does.
It really is. They have done a remarkable job of thinking through all the different details of how you would make something like this work. And by the way, they started a really long time ago. They first started working on the system in 2011. First flights were then in the 2014, 2015 timeframe. So they've been working on this for 9 years. And so it really takes care of the aviate, navigate, communicate. When you push the button, it goes through an algorithm to sort through all the different possible airports that you might consider landing at. It takes a look at what the weather is, and essentially you could think of it as almost like each piece of weather is a different layer on a transparency that you might put in an overhead projector, and it will steer around the filled-in areas that might be weather or anything else that show up on that. And it will communicate. So it's going to go on to the emergency frequency and broadcast position. It's also going to contact ATC, let them know that an emergency is in progress. It's going to squawk 7700. So, of course, it also does a rather remarkable thing, which is, it chooses an airport, flies an approach, puts it into a flare, lands, and then turns off the airplane. So it's pretty phenomenal. I'd like to say that Garmin has thought of just about everything.
Now, Max, the website says that this system will do everything, including the depressurization that needs to be done on approach to landing. This system must be an amazingly well put together piece of software to be able to do all this, and to basically do what the pilot in command would normally do if he was in charge of flying the aircraft.
Well, I think it's not a coincidence that they started it in the G3000 system. That's in the mid-range of their product line that goes into turboprops, into light jets, everything from the Piper M600, which is the first one to achieve certification, the Cirrus Vision Jet, which is the second announced platform that will be getting this on up into things like the Honda Jet, the Phenom 300E, and aircraft of that class. So you've got tremendous capability in the G3000 system to begin with. And then you might ask, well, why not have put it in an even more capable system like the the G5000? And I think the answer is that there are more G3000s out there, and the G5000 is really designed for the Part 25 aircraft, which are crew flown anyway. And the whole idea behind Autoland is this is for pilot incapacitation. The G3000, many of those aircraft are single pilot flown, which means there isn't another crew member to land the airplane. So this is really the ideal platform, I think, with lots of capability, and where you might actually have a case where a passenger is able to save their life by reaching up and pushing one button.
It's a system, Max. Obviously, you've signed it. Obviously, there's a if there is a passenger in the back, that they can come up forward and press this button to activate the system. But as you said, if it is a single pilot in the aircraft, if there is no one else on board the aircraft, and there is something that happens to the pilot, does the system pick up on any other kind of cues that will then tell it to activate itself, or?
So I know that there is one system which will do that, which is the EDM system, the Emergency Descent Management System. So if, for example, a pilot, suppose there was an oxygen problem of some kind and a pilot became incapacitated, EDM would eventually, after a period of several minutes, depending on the altitude you're at, automatically reduce the throttles and bring you down to an altitude of either 14 or 15,000 feet, depending upon what that particular aircraft manufacturer has specified. I think, and I'm not sure, that eventually Autoland in those aircrafts would kick in. But in general, the system is designed for someone, either a pilot who realizes that they're losing their capabilities, or a passenger to reach up and touch that single button toward the top of the cockpit. Now, there are actually two buttons. It's not a single button. The other button is to turn the system back off again if you decide that, oh, guess what? That was not the air conditioning switch after all.
The system itself, Max, obviously, is it an add-on system that bolts on alongside the 3000, or is it actually installed within the Garmin 3000 system itself?
So there is additional wiring that has to be put into the airplane, but I would say that a large percentage of the components are, software that are in the system. You do have some additional external controls. For example, you have to have ways to do steering on the ground and also to do braking. So there are some additional servos that are placed in there. In terms of operating the throttle, that's already in there because Autoland requires that the auto throttle be installed in that aircraft. And right now, I think there are 3 aircraft that have the auto throttle. The other one, besides the 2 aircraft I've mentioned, is the TBM 940. So it wouldn't surprise me if at some time in the future they announce Autoland for that aircraft as well.
Now, Armando, obviously our fellow co-host on the show, flies the Pilatus PC-12. Is this a system that will be put onto these, do you know?
Only if Honeywell comes up with a similar system, since they don't use the Garmin 3000 in that aircraft.
How much roughly, Max, do you know is a system to buy?
So you can't buy a Garmin G3000 system and install it in your airplane. It's only available to OEMs, original equipment manufacturers like Cessna and Daher and companies like that, to place into their aircraft. There is no kind of retrofit aftermarket available. I have seen, for example, the G5000 does have some aftermarket retrofit customers. So, for example, that system can be placed into the Hawker 400 as well as the some of the Citation XLS models. And I believe I've seen a price for the hardware of somewhere in the vicinity of $150,000 just for the G5000. That doesn't include installation, by the way, which runs about a month. So you could figure, that's probably, let's see, 20 times. Yeah, that's probably another $60,000 easily in installation cost. So yeah, if you were to take one of these and drop them into an airplane, you're looking at over $200,000, and that wouldn't include Autoland because that has some additional components to it. But that kind of gets you in the ballpark of what this would cost.
Do you think, Max, that this will be a system that will be kind of not enforced, but that will be put into or be fitted into most aircraft of that kind of size?
The really nice thing about Garmin's philosophy is that they really have, throughout their existence, tried to democratize some of these higher end capabilities, move them down to lower end aircraft so that they are widely available. And they did comment. I was at the factory on the day this was announced late last year, and they did specifically comment that they do see a path both upwards and downwards for this system. They didn't obviously announce anything, but I think you could envision that in aircraft that don't have auto throttles, for example, that there might be communications that are issued to the passenger that say, now pull the throttle back, and might even have a picture or something like that. So yes, I think that this is going to become more broadly available. The other way I would love to see this be used would be to make it not just for emergencies. This apparently makes pretty darn good landings. I think it would be awesome if there would come a day where we could actually use it for routine landings. You can imagine if you were landing in terrible weather with poor visibility, that it would be nice to just say, you know what, let's watch the aircraft land this one. So I'm hopeful that that might happen someday.
What do you think, Max, would be the possibility of this kind of system being kind of integrated into a commercial airline? Do you think that there'll be a day that comes? I know we joke obviously that the Airbus is a one button push start and finish aircraft, but do you think this could be kind of the way forward for all commercial airliners to have that one button does all?
Wait, that kind of brings up a couple thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
One is they already have some kinds of autoland capability, though it doesn't have the full communication and selection of airport and things like that. And interestingly, the Garmin system in some ways is a lot more capable than autoland that exists in airliners today. The autoland system is based off of GPS. That means Garmin can basically choose, any of probably on the order of 10,000 airports around the world that have GPS approaches into them. If you look at the autoland and the airlines, those are limited to Cat 3 ILSs, of which we have perhaps 600 ILS in the entire United States, of which fewer than those are going to be Cat 3 available. So this is a very broadly available type capability. And then this also, I think, brings up the whole issue of, I hate to even mention this, but, single pilot flown airliners. And, it's a terrible thing to even be bringing up at a time when, pilots are being laid off around the world. But we've, for example, on the Airplane Geeks podcast, we've talked many times in the past about how certainly the airlines would love to be able to reduce their operating cost. And I would expect that at some point in the future, they'll be looking at how to, at least starting first with cargo aircraft, how to bring that down to a single, pilot flown aircraft. And I got to say, from a personal standpoint, boy, I'm not looking forward to that. I just think that half the fun of flying is having somebody up there with you to talk with and enjoy the experience. And if you're going to have to sit up there 6 hours by yourself, I'm not sure I want that job. I think that doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me.
So where do you think, Max, this could go from here? From the system they've got in place now, which obviously, does the whole auto lands thing. It'll land the aircraft on the runway, shut down the engines. Where do you think Garmin can go from here to, improve or to add additional safeties to the system?
Sure. Well, I think probably the obvious, most easiest way to go would be to move it up to the G5000. If there were OEMs that thought that even though we have two pilots, it would be helpful to have it in case both pilots ate the chicken and both are incapacitated. But I think that we could also see that it would be nice to have it available to do the landing in non-emergency capability. You can't test it, for example, today because anytime you push the button, now the transponder is squawking 7700, it's broadcasting, and it's also sending an email, by the way, back to the manufacturer saying, hey, someone just pushed this button. You're going to want to download the data and find out what this was all about. But I can see it potentially migrating down into some of the higher end single engine piston aircraft. I think an obvious candidate would be the Cirrus SR-22T and the Cirrus SR-22. I mean, these are fairly expensive aircraft that have pilots and owners who really enjoy having the latest, greatest kind of capability. I don't know that they'll have an auto throttle in that aircraft, but even if they didn't, there would still be ways to make that aircraft work. For example, if you look at the EDM, emergency descent management, not all aircraft that have that, have an auto throttle capability. So in some cases, it'll come down at a faster speed than would be ideal because they can't control the throttle. And I would imagine that similar kinds of compromises could be made if this were to, move down into a single engine Cessna or Cirrus as well.
It is an amazing system. When you read the actual story that we've got here on the businessairportinternational.com website, that lists the whole kind of scenario on here of what would happen in the event that the pilot was incapacitated, and when you press this button and it lands. It sounds just an amazing system, and obviously you were lucky enough to go and see the unveiling of this system. I'm guessing it was quite a busy day when they unveiled this at Garmin.
It was an extremely busy day. Yes, they had a lot of things going on that day, but it was fun. It was very exciting to be there, when that happened. Yes, you say it's an amazing system. I look at this really as kind of a watershed event, of which we don't have many of these in aviation. And I was kind of thinking back, if I look at least from a general aviation standpoint, what are the earlier watershed type events? And I would say that the introduction of GPS in the early 1990s, that was just a major event that has over time totally changed the way GA aircraft are flown. The introduction of glass cockpits in 2003 in the Cirrus SR-22, again, that was a revolution I never thought we would see happen. I just never thought that the systems would become inexpensive enough that you could afford to put them into a GA aircraft. And now, 17 years later, autoland. So to me, those are kind of the three major watershed events that mark really large seismic shifts in general aviation. Most of which we couldn't really anticipate, and which bring tremendous capability and still just kind of leave me in awe when I think about them.
So Max, thanks for joining us. But before you go, we'll have to ask you, how are things with you? I mean, obviously you're regularly flying aircraft, going and visiting and picking up aircraft for customers and clients and stuff. I'm guessing that's all fairly quiet at the moment with what's going on in the world. But how is life?
Well, thanks for asking. And it's really kind of ironic because I came off of what was probably the busiest couple of months in my entire life, where in December, January, February, I was just going nonstop. I had an 8-day period where I was in Knoxville, Tennessee 3 times. And that was spanning before and after Christmas, picking up 2 SR-22Ts, picking up 1 Cirrus Vision Jet, flying them with their owners back across the country to basically on March 11th, I just kind of looked at the data and said, this probably makes sense to start hanging out at home. And about a week later, we got the shutdown here. So I don't know how long that's been. I've lost track of time. It kind of feels like Groundhog Day here. I mean, every day is the same. So, and you can tell from the video, I haven't shaved since about March 12th or 13th. I just kind of decided, you know what? I'm just going to take it easy here. And the good news is it's provided me a lot of time to finish up a book that has gotten done much sooner than I would have expected. So I've used the time very productively. And yes, I really am looking forward to getting back into an airplane at some point in time. And I'm just not sure how that's going to come about. We've got to, I think, still kind of figure out, some safe protocols for having 2 people in a tightly confined space for a couple of hours. I mean, that's obviously the longer you spend with someone, the more contact time you have, the greater the chance of passing something. And of course, when you're talking, that's expelling a lot of, droplets. And gosh, I'm talking nonstop in the aircraft. So there's just not me to think about. I have to think about, would I be potentially, bringing back a virus to home as well and to my wife. And so it's like just a lot of things to think about, and I just don't have an answer for you. But in the meantime, I'll be cranking out books.
Excellent. So, well, we'll have to have you on the show when you release that book, just so we could find out some more info on it. But in the meantime, Max, before we let you go, obviously you present and bring to the podcast realm each week your own podcast, the Aviation News Talk podcast. So, before we go, give that a massive plug.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that last episode, which just came out a couple of days ago, we talked about how to fly the commercial maneuvers, and I strongly encouraged anyone who has got an interest in upping their pilot skills to consider getting the commercial. As I said, just because. And as I mentioned on the show, I was very happy that I had my commercial, which I never expected to use. But then when one day someone said, hey, you should get your CFI, boom, I could go off and do that. And lo and behold, it ultimately became my second career. So we talk about everything that's general aviation oriented on the Aviation News Talk.
Actually, I have to recommend episode 148. That was your weight and balance episode. Absolutely thoroughly enjoyed that episode. Very interesting indeed. Definitely one to listen to. But no, thanks, Max, for coming on and joining us today. It's been absolutely great to have you on the show and answer all the questions about this particular system. And I have to wish you all the very best from all of us here at the PTUK, all the team, and wish you all the very best for flying in the future, and not forgetting as well your great book. So yeah, thanks for that.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great fun to be back here with you guys.
Take care, Max.
Bye-bye.
Oh, I do like listening to Max Trescott.
His voice is quite
what a
top
listen,
isn't
chap he is. Oh, fantastic. Such a knowledgeable fella, isn't he?
Mm.
Yeah, he's just legendary, isn't he?
It's nice to have a chat with Max. I know he'd be a hive of information, being as he got the chance to go to Garmin's HQ. But Armando, you obviously fly the Pilatus PC-12, which is a similar size to the slightly bigger than, I think it's slightly bit bigger than the EasyJet, about the same size.
It's a little bit bigger than the EasyJet. It's a little bit bigger than the TBM. Both of these aircraft have the autoland system, but like Max was saying, there's nothing I can add to what Max said on the system. It's just, as our chat room was talking about, the autoland as a function has been around for a while, but the idea to have it in general aviation aircraft is just a great thing. And it may not be the way. So just yesterday I was up at one of my local airports, and I was signing up Megan to take what's called a pinch hitter course. That is, if something were to happen to me, or I'm feeling unwell, that she would have enough knowledge, and it's a 4-hour course for her to be able to land that aircraft.
Wow.
Oh.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's not an official course or anything. It's just one of our local CFIs that does it. The Gene's got over 30,000 hours as a flight instructor, and he does this course for anybody that flies as a passenger. This eliminates, the autoland system eliminates having to do that. And in addition to that, it may not necessarily be the passenger in sort of that movie setting reaching up and hitting the autoland function. Me as a pilot, I may recognize the onset of a medical condition, and for the purposes of safety, I'll reach up and hit the autoland function, knowing that it's going to work, and knowing that I may not make it down to the ground, at least in full capacity. So it may not necessarily be the passenger. So to have this system, and yes, it's costly, but it's always costly when it's innovative. When you're talking about 5 years from now, this may be a little bit more commonplace in some of the aircraft coming out of the factories. And it's just, like he said, it's just a benchmark system in general aviation.
I should just say, actually, while we were listening to that, it would appear that Armando was getting some unexpected help with the podcast there. Somebody had taken over his station whilst that was going on there. It's starting our own podcast, or
well, as we've talked about already, there's a tornado warning, and it's starting to rain pretty hard here. And you guys can, if you're watching the video, you can see that it's actually turned almost to night here where I am on my end. and both dogs are not fans of that, so they're by my side. One of them, the little one who's in charge of our house, Lois Lane, decided to get up on my lap, and Benny was right at my feet. So,
indeed, yeah, absolutely. Well, fingers crossed you'll stay safe, Armando, and well, obviously, Dr. Steph, obviously, she's not a million miles away from you at all, is she? So, fingers crossed, it is just a warning and just a bit of bad weather coming through rather than anything more sinister.
Yeah, Steph will see it first since it's all coming from that direction.
Lovely, good. So you can get plenty of warning then. Yeah.
Yep. Take the woman. Don't hurt me.
Charming. Lovely. Oh, dear. Right, well, it's time to start wrapping up, gentlemen. What's everybody up to this week? Carlos, you said that you might have to go and do a bit of work this week.
I might just have a little day, possibly Tuesday, just a little bit of work just to get out of the house for the day. But apart from that, I should be valeting more cars for people this week.
Dear. Dear. Richard Adams has just said in the chat room off the back of our conversation there, he was saying, you can always go a hound. See, no, okay, just me. Fair enough. All right, so sorry about that. Nev, another week of furlough beckons for you, I believe.
Yes, we like to call it rotation.
My apologies. Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. So I should be doing another rotation next week and then back to work on June the 1st. So the highlight of next week is having the car service, probably.
Oh, steady.
That'll be about it. But just whilst I have the mic, I just wanted to... there's some more sad news to report, and it breaks my heart. I've spoke to Paul, who was one of our hosts at the 200th show.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
He and Nick run NP Simulations in London, in Putney. And if you remember, so many people went to that event. We had some fantastic couple of dinners. Honestly, the hospitality these guys gave us was just incredible. And I just got an email from him this week after I wrote to him. He said, Nev, it's good to hear from you. I'm afraid that we've gone into liquidation as the complete cessation of revenue, coupled with the investment that we had secured being withdrawn due to the COVID-19 crisis, has left us unable to operate. So they've had to cease trading, I'm afraid. And what a pity that was, because the facility was fantastic to begin with, but also the guys put so much into it as well. So for Nick, Paul and Joe, I hope you find something soon as well, because all of us really appreciated everything you did for us.
Oh, well, I mean, our 200th is without doubt probably the greatest day I think PTUK ever had, isn't it? I mean, it was just such a fantastic experience, and they were, as you say, they were so generous with their time. Everybody got a good go of the simulator that was there
to enable all the listeners that we had. Every single person who came that day got to fly in the 737-800 sim.
And I particularly enjoyed setting up Captain Jeff, obviously, for a rather unpleasant flight into wherever it was, with severe winds and all sorts. So it was really sad news from this week, and it's such a great idea that this pandemic's got an awful lot to be responsible for, isn't it?
I was just looking at their Facebook page, actually, going back to 2016. It's still up there, and it shows the installation of the 737 simulator, the whole thing literally being parked up outside and loaded into the building and being constructed. Absolutely incredible, really. So the amount of effort that went into this enterprise was amazing. But anyway, best of luck from all of us, guys, and I hope you chaps find something soon.
Absolutely, yeah. Much agreed. So Armando, what are you up to this week? What's in your diary?
Hey guys, so I'll be back to work here in a few days. I've actually had 7 days off, which is kind of nice. But when I get back up to Pittsburgh, hopefully I'll get a chance to get together with Rick, and we're going to record a little segment, just kind of a military focused segment, and we'll air that out in the near future. On Memorial Day here in the U.S. next Monday, we're going to record a segment with Bob Mills. So Bob is a former U.S. Navy A-4 and F-14 Tomcat pilot. He is a very experienced legacy airline pilot. He's still an active legacy airline pilot. He is an air show performer and the president of one of the Reno air racing classes, and just recently bought a Stearman that he flew across the country. So we'll get that recorded. It's probably going to be lengthy because he's just got a pretty long aviation background. So maybe we'll split that up into a couple parts. I'll let Nev decide that. He's the king of that kind of stuff. But,
it sounds great. Sounds great. I've got a very quick update actually that's just appeared in our show notes. Thanks, John, for that. It says an update on the PIA crash. At least 7 survivors as opposed to the 4 that we mentioned in the show earlier, and at least 57 dead as opposed to the 47 that we said earlier. So that's a senior member of the Pakistani government told Sky News so far that there were 7 survivors. So that's an update on that. Going back to the week ahead, I mean, I have a grocery shopping trip planned midweek.
Well, can I come?
Well, we'll see. You know, that will interrupt my otherwise very hectic schedule of sitting. So that's probably my highlight. A little bit of a shop. That's about it for me, really. Social media links. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can search social media by putting or searching for Plain Talking UK as the tag. Our WhatsApp number, which means you can basically keep Carlos up until the wee small hours. That's a lot of fun. +44 757 22 49166. That is +44 757 22 49166. The email for the show, podcast@plaintalkinguk.com. And of course the website www.plaintalkinguk.com is where you can go. There's a new website coming hopefully next week, ladies and gentlemen, fingers crossed. Why not subscribe to our YouTube channel? You'll get all the notifications of when we go live, and you can help shape the conversation of the show by joining us in the chat room. Go to youtube.com and search for Plain Talking UK. On our website there is also the Amazon link. You can do your shopping, you can contribute towards the show without having to sort of physically put money in. Amazon pay us like an advertising referral fee if you use that link, or if you do have a bit of spare change. We don't blame you at the moment, by the way, if you don't, and we're very thankful for all of our Patreons who are so generous with their money and time. But why not become a Patreon donator if you can afford to? Patreon.com, and then just search for Plain Talking UK. Many options in there on how to get involved and help the show stay on air. So yes, I think I speak for all of us when I say thank you very much to all of our wonderful Patreon donators. As I say, it is very strange times at the moment, and their support is even more invaluable in these difficult times.
Very true, Matt, very true. And as we said before, has enabled us this month to invest in that lovely piece of kit you have in the studio there.
I know, it's very beautiful here, and it's doing wonders for our audio, I'm delighted to say. So very much worth it. That's it. Time to wrap up, guys.
That's it then, guys. Big thanks to everyone who has joined us in the YouTube chat room tonight. All the family members in there. Great to see you all. Thanks for taking time out of your Friday evening to join us. Also, not forgetting the audio downloaders of the show as well. Thanks for downloading the show through all the various podcasts you type download places. And don't forget, if you download through iTunes, a little review and the starry thing would be lovely. So if you could do that, that'd be great. So big thanks to all the hosts, for everyone for joining us tonight. Armando and Matt and Nev, big thanks to all you guys. But from me, Carlos here in my home studio, from Matt over in the PTUK studios, from Nev in the Nev Tech studios, and from Armando in the Tornado Warning studios. Take care. Have a great weekend, everyone. Enjoy your Sunday roasts.
See you later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.